Hello. Oakville's lands are treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we're home to Indigenous peoples from the Anishinaabe peoples, the Attawandaron Neutral Society, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Métis. Today, we appreciate Indigenous teachings of interconnectivity among all elements of creation. Our town traces its founding to three groups of settlers: Indigenous people, long present, white people from Burlington and the rest of the empire, and Black people fleeing slavery in the United States. Oakville settlers lived and worked together with a vision of a community of harmony and prosperity. After 30 years of settlement, the Ontario legislature officially recognized Oakville as a town in 1857. Today, our town still attracts residents for the vision of livability that generations together have created. Please join me in council now in O Canada. Thank you, everybody. I'll now call to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, I understand we may have some regrets recorded.
Yes, we have regrets from Councillor Sandhu this evening.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And let's see. First, I'll ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. And Madam Clerk, I'm not seeing any. Council, would would anyone like to offer any changes or corrections to the minutes as listed in the agenda? And failing that, would there be a mover and seconder for the minutes? Councillor Lischina and Councillor Knoll, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, that motion carries. Council, we have no public presentations, but we could now resolve into committee of the whole for the business of the meeting if we had a mover and seconder. Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Giddings, thank you very much. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there's none. The motion carries. Council, on your consent item list tonight, there are a couple of items that I don't think we're going to be able to deal with as consent. The first is, based on things I've heard from members, is 7.2, the waterfront parks paid parking, and I'd like to recognize Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to refer this back to staff for further options for Council's consideration. There were no options on this for no paid parking for residents of Oakville, and that I'd like to see included in the options that are provided. I've heard from several other residents as well as members of council who've been very good about suggesting other municipalities that have excellent programs that provide for free parking for the residents while still charging parking for those who are not residents of the municipality. So I'd like to refer it back.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm, are you interested in seconding that, or did you have something else?
No, Your Worship, I'd like to second Councillor Duddick's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Adams, your hand is up. You're next.
Thank you very much. Double check this here. Thank you very much. I had, in addition to the concerns over the paid parking option, I wondered if staff could also provide options to modify the 3-hour parking limit that's provided in the parks bylaw. I wonder if A, that's really necessary, and B, if it is necessary, could it be a longer period, like 4 or 6 hours within the parks bylaw? And the last question I have for staff is whether the parking limitations that we've now put in place around a number of the side streets around the waterfront, whether a one side of the street approach for the parking prohibitions would be appropriate, or if the two side of the street really is required. I'm not sure if staff could provide any comment on that, since that's something that they can, as I understand it, manage in between council meetings.
Well, I can tell you that as framed by Councillor Dudek and Councillor Chisholm, those requests fit totally within the ambit or the structure of what they asked for. So I'm sure staff have taken those requests down. I see hands from Councillor Elgar and Councillor O'Meara, and I see an old-fashioned hand from Councillor Grant. Councillor Elgar, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I just want to say I want to thank Councillor Dudek and Councillor Chisholm for referring this back to staff. After had a lot of feedback on this, and I think there's a few municipalities around, Collingwood is one of them, who seem to have a very good approach to this and solving it so that everyone's happy that live in the town in Collingwood, and I think we can do the same thing in Oakville. So I thank them for shooting this back to staff for another look. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Worship. I haven't heard a timeline yet for this, and I'm wondering if we can. Sorry, we can.
We'll get you a timeline. I understand.
Thank you.
From staff
it's already. My point to this was that it's already started, and I know Councillor Robertson and I's inbox has already been inundated with nothing but concerns and grievances and everything. So we're right back at it because of the warm weather before we've even got started at it. So the sooner we can get that back to us, the better. Thank you.
Okay, so I understand from staff that they will be able to bring their new report back at or before the next council meeting in June. And as soon as it's ready, if it's ready before then, I will call a special council meeting so that no time is lost. Does that suit, I hope, everyone? I'm going to Councillor Grant now, and then Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Dudek for sharing what I think is a belief that all of us, that there's a bit of wrong-headedness in the idea of paid parking for an area where many people have contributed their tax dollars and want to spend time. I did also additionally, though, want to thank the staff for their report. Hania specifically did such a great job with it, and we spoke last week on a few of the things that I had issues with. I'm glad we're sending this back. I'm glad we're looking at other options, including more time. Thank you, Councillor Adams, for that, because I think anybody who comes out with a family realizes that 3 hours is really not enough time to spend at a park. So thank you again to staff, and thank you to the councillors for looking for other more proper answers. Back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Your Worship. I echo my colleagues' comments, but I'd also like to add the scan of municipalities who have a year under their belt with respect to waterfront parking being charged to out of towners or residents out of that city. So, for example, in Barrie, they implemented this a year ago. So there is some data with respect to how it went last summer, and I would be interested to know whether it's working or not.
Councillor, I can reassure you that staff are fully apprised of those, and they'll include that information in their report. Councillor Chisholm, your electronic hand is up, so I'm coming back to you.
That was my fault. Sorry.
All righty. All right.
Sorry, the hot red phone is going. I just don't want to lose sight of the main topic of the report that was provided by staff, which I found very well done and very comprehensive. On the page, I think it's on page 31, the 12 points put across, not just about the paid parking, but all the enhancements and signage and bike racks, I think are very relevant, and I just don't want to lose sight of that. That's as part of a package to consider when this comes back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. I believe staff are fully aware. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity regarding Councillor Adams' request, directing staff to look at, was it longer time limits, just for clarification, up to 6 hours?
Yes, he wanted council, he would like council to have options for different time lengths rather than 3 hours. And do you have another question?
Well, if that, we'll wait for the staff to come back, but if that could include the possible effects that it could have in terms of, for example, the downtown BIA, where long-term parking comes at a premium. I'd hate to lose long-term parking to employees or retail staff at the expense of allowing people to enjoy our waterfront.
I'm sure you'll get a comprehensive look. Now we need to go to Councillor Robertson, and I'm sorry if I missed you earlier, but we have a new feature on Zoom. A little pop-up alerts me when you put your hand up.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the report. When you create your next report, could you please put in the cost of what it's been for bylaw and for parks to actually look after the waterfront in the last year versus the pre-pandemic time in terms of enforcement of the parking, the surrounding streets enforcement, and the creation of any new parking, which is based on the numbers, because I spoke with Hanya today about the numbers, and someplace like Brodie Beach has 26 public spots, and that's all. So we know that parking pays for parking. So to come up with other solutions, we need to cost out what this means to us as a whole in terms of our tax base. So I'd like to see that in the report, please.
Thank you for that. I can assure you that staff never take their eye off the dollar part of this. So with all of that, may I put the vote on this item? Any objection to the motion by Councillor Dudek and Councillor Chisholm to refer back with all the questions of council? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. That motion carries. Council, we have another consent item, which is 7.3, the Accountability and Integrity Commissioner's Periodic Report, which I'm sure you read with interest. Mr. Jeff Abrams of Principals Integrity would like an opportunity to speak with you about his report. So, Madam Clerk, would you please, whatever you do, give the Zoom to Mr. Abrams.
There we are. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Good evening to everyone. I hope you can hear me all right.
We hear you very well.
Thank you, and we appreciate the opportunity. I intend to be very brief. The periodic report on paper really doesn't tell the full story, and we think that this is, generally speaking, a good news story, and so we wanted to present it in person, so to speak. My partner, Janice Atwood-Betkovsky, is not able to be here with us this evening, so it'll be me. Just give me a few minutes, if you would, to go through the report, and I would be happy to take any questions at the conclusion. You are well aware, members of council, of our role, but just for the benefit of the public that may be viewing us this evening, an integrity commissioner is a statutory role. It's an independent role, independent of council. Council is required to have an integrity commissioner. And our role is actually quite broad. We do everything from assisting the municipality in developing its ethical framework, its policies, its codes of conduct. We provide education and training. We provide, on request, advice to any member of council that might seek it from us on an issue of code of conduct, the gray area there, or on issues pertaining to the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act or your general common law responsibilities to avoid conflicts of interest. And those are the important functions, we think, the most essential functions of an integrity commissioner. But there is a residual function, that is to serve as an independent party, to hear complaints, they're called inquiries under the Act, to help resolve them, and if necessary, to investigate them fully, and if necessary, to report out and make recommendations, findings on the complaint, and recommendations on findings. One other interesting feature of an integrity commissioner's role is that the work we do is confidential under the statute. So when a member of council or a member of a local board reaches out for advice, the advice back is confidential. No one knows about it. And when we conduct an investigation, for the most part, the conversations back and forth are confidential conversations. We do have a discretion to report out in a public report things we think are considered necessary in order for you to understand our report. But by and large, the work we do is done under a cloak of confidentiality. With respect to the town, and this is a periodic report that speaks to a 2.5-year period since our appointment back in September of 2018. We have engaged in a couple of pieces of education and training with you, both in January 2019. We did some sessions with council, and then we worked with staff on the development of code of conduct for local board and council staff relations policy, both of which are requirements under the statute. Advice, again, is confidential, and it's important, we think, the most important function, so that members are able to avoid the pitfalls, so that we are all able to avoid anyone filing a complaint with respect to one of you or a member of local board. And in the period covered by this report, we've responded to requests for advice on 4 separate occasions and provided advice memorandum for each of those. With respect to complaint investigation and resolution, there have been 2 occasions where a member of the public has filed an inquiry with us, and we're happy to say that on both occasions, the matters were resolved without need for a report. We'd be remiss if we didn't take this opportunity to talk to you not just about our activity in Oakville, but what our observations are about the field from across the province. One of the areas of most interest is the area of conflicts of interest. You know well that you're bound by the provisions of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and as we say in the report, it has this mechanism of personal direct interests or deemed interests and indirect interests. It can get relatively complicated. But as we've been seeing from the results of the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry and in other places, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, as narrow as it is, as focused as it is not the whole story when it comes to the requirement of a member of council to avoid conflicts of interest. And so there's a common law notion that was spoken to at length in the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry. It's one we endorse. In fact, it was our work that was referenced in the recommendations of the inquiry with respect to this particular matter. Moving from conflict of interest to conduct, respect and non-disparagement is a common theme in Integrity Commissioner reports across the province. You should know that conduct is required to be good conduct, whether it happens in the council chamber, outside the chamber, wherever a member of council is acting in their capacity as a member of council. And that includes on social media, which has attracted a number of complaints across the province in different respects. One emerging area, it doesn't appear in the report, but one emerging area is with respect to the notion of blocking. And it's become particularly focused in the course of these last few months in the pandemic when members have been meeting virtually through tools such as the one we're using this evening. We do recommend that members of councils adopt policy that speaks directly to social media use, in particular blocking on open social media channels, because those open channels where nobody needs to seek permission to follow you, for example, On those open channels, they do resemble an electronic version of the town square. And while members certainly have an obligation to curate their sites and to probably block people who are engaging in offensive behavior, abusive behavior, that shouldn't be done arbitrarily. And so we think the town should, and all of municipalities should have a policy that includes something that says the blocking should not be done arbitrarily. When it is done, notice is given and the reasons are given, and that it be done for a proportional length of time. Simple as that. So that blocking isn't arbitrary. Another issue we find across the province is members of council not staying in their lanes, engaging in operational issues, attempting to represent the municipality when, of course, each one of you is aware you are part of a democratically elected collective, and it's the council decision that matters. But those aren't areas that we've seen occurring here, and I'd like to say this is a generally good news story. We're happy to be serving as your integrity commissioner. We look forward to doing some additional work, to perhaps having a look at your code of conduct and bringing that up to current standards. But in all other respects, we're quite pleased with our engagement with you, and I hope you are with us. And with that, Mr. Mayor, knowing how busy the evening is, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much for your information, Mr. Abrams. Do any members have questions for Mr. Abrams? Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for being here, Mr. Abrams. Question, I think you clarified it for me towards the end of your comments. On our page 73, you have a paragraph about halfway down. Another area of prominence is the failure of some members of council to adhere to rules, and below that, some members of council, and it talks about disparaging comments. That is specific to this council, or is this what you've experienced at some other councils around the province?
It is the latter, certainly. And the point of raising issues that appear elsewhere is that this serves as a useful learning opportunity for members of council, and it's an observation that we have made elsewhere. In fact, it occurs in a number of places. Principles Integrity happens to serve for about 40 municipalities across the province. We work closely with other integrity commissioners through our voluntary association, MICO, Municipal Integrity Commissioners of Ontario. And respect and disparagement is certainly a common discussion point for all of us. And it is something to be avoided because it, as we set out in our mantra, what we're really trying to do is increase the perception amongst your community, in your community, that council's operating with integrity. It is a perception issue because people tend to assume that there is a lack of integrity, unfortunately. And one of the ways that some municipal councillors contribute to that perception of lack of integrity is by engaging in disparaging conduct, either with each other or with members of their communities. And so we feel it important to raise these issues so that that they can be dealt with if they do arise by this council.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more, which is why I asked for their clarification. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Abrams. And Council, I'll now turn your attention to the balance of the consent items. I understood from Councillor O'Meara that he was desirous of moving approval of 7.9, and I will recognize him for that purpose, and I'll ask him if he would include in his motion the rest of the consent items.
I will, Your Worship, and I just got sort of the late-breaking memo that the rest of the council colleagues did, and as many of you know, the Sobeys down here closed up last November, and they ventured out on one of the most expeditious transformations into a farm boy that I think we've seen in a long time. They were hit with a lot of delays with COVID. They initially had told the community it would be an early May opening, and they're trying to get it open as soon as possible. Of course, the devil's in the details, and their standard signs are bigger than what this council has said should happen. And we have a normal process for that, and they're willing to go through this process. But time is a difficult one to wrestle with, and we have many seniors here who day in and day out are on myself and Councillor Robertson. When is our grocery store going to open? So, I even the most ardent people in opposition to a lot of the development in Brawny are still coming to us saying, "When's the grocery store opening?" So I'm fairly confident that this will be received as anything that can expedite the opening will be received positively by the community writ large. But again, Farm Boy is willing to take on any of the ancillary issues that may come up if it's not. So I would ask for option 2 that was presented in the memo for us, so we can try and open up the Farm Boy as soon as possible, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, according to their schedule. And hence why I'm putting that motion forward. And your worship, if that's amenable to council, I'd also be willing to put up the rest of the consent items for approval as well.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. So, Council, is there any objection to Councillor O'Meara's motion to approve the balance of the consent, public and private or confidential? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and the balance of the consent items, public and confidential, are approved. And that allows us to move forward many pages to our first discussion item, and that is the COVID-19 update from our CAO, Ms. Jane Closey. Ms. Closey, you have the Zoom.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And the presentation has come up. So maybe we can just shift to the next slide. Do I move these or does someone else? I can with the arrows? Okay. So we had fairly good news. Actually, I'm sure you've heard the good news, certainly on the radio in terms of the newspapers, whatever media you look at frequently, that the number of COVID cases is significantly dropping. And this graph actually shows that pictorially for you. Really, the blue line sees a significant drop in the third wave. And we all are feeling, I'm sure, a little bit of sense of relief as we move forward. So today we have the lowest number of cases since early March at just under 1,040. So that is certainly good news. Halton itself has also been hitting low numbers than they've ever had before. I think today there were 10 cases in Oakville itself. So we're dropping in all areas. The trend is that over time, all age groups actually have been declining in the active cases that are happening. There is one age group, though, which is interesting. The 80-plus age group has actually been increasing in the last short while, which is surprising because vaccinated. But I think it probably is reflective of the hesitancy. I know when Halton Region had first announced the 80-plus group being vaccinated, there was about 80%, just over 80% of them who took the vaccination. So that perhaps explains why they are the only group that's actually increasing in the number of COVID cases. So if we go to the next slide. As of Thursday last week, the province threw out the color-coded stages that they had before and brought forward a 3-step roadmap to reopen Ontario. It is across the entire province, so they're no longer looking at regional approaches. They're applying the same approach to all of Ontario. And it's very much based on the vaccination rates as well as some of the health indicators. So there is, you can see step 1, step 2, and step 3 is predominantly based on the vaccination levels, with step 1 at about a 60% vaccination level within the province, which I understand we're very close to that, but the news reports indicated that we should be there by about June 14th. And then each one of those steps beyond that is 21 days later. But it is all dependent on the other health indicators that are there and us actually achieving those vaccination rates. So I think that comes about to the end of July. That would be into the step 3 in their 3-step roadmap. They did, though, announce very early on Thursday that they'd also have a pre-step. And that was the pre-step that introduced the outdoor recreational spaces, which I'll get to in a moment. So that is a good summary, actually, of the staged approach that the province is now undertaking province-wide. And if we go to the next slide, the vaccination program is also very positive. I think it's about 57% of Halton residents have received their first dosage. You can see the number there of just over 300,000, which is quite promising. The region has on their website, and I didn't dare list it here because they have eligibility for pretty well everyone. And in fact, they're moving shortly to have the 12 to 17-year-olds also vaccinated as well. So that we'll be ready for the school year and hopefully any of the day camps that we can have throughout the summer. So very good news on the vaccination program and its progression, particularly here as well as in the province, and the country, I think, is at about just under 60% as well. So that's all very promising. If we go to the next slide, just in terms of Oakville staff, we are continuing to encourage all to get a vaccination. We are allowing for time off for employees to be able to go out and get their vaccination appointments. So we're working through that as quickly as possible. The first responders, or those in the healthcare industry, are just about ready to get their second dosage as well. So the bookings for those should be proceeding fairly quickly. So that is also going very well, and we've had very positive responses from staff themselves. So the next slide, I just wanted to, municipal enforcement continues to work around the clock. This weekend with the warm weather was certainly challenging for all of them who are out there working through the COVID restrictions and requirements. The police are starting their Parks Patrol program. It formally starts on June 4th, but they were out this weekend, and they were all very helpful in terms of patrolling the parks and the more sensitive areas. We are taking an approach in municipal enforcement of looking at more of the high-risk cases so that we can put those as a priority and get out to those. The lower risk priorities are lower in priority in terms of our response times. So if we go to the next slide. So as of Thursday, when the provincial announcement came out, it was by midnight on Friday night or first thing Saturday morning where all of these outdoor recreation amenities could be open throughout the province. So our staff quickly got together and we're able to open predominantly all of those facilities through the summer, and I think it's through the weekend, and it's continuing on through the week. So our residents, with the absolutely fabulous long weekend we had a real opportunity to get out and enjoy the outdoor recreational amenities we have in the town. And if we just flip to the next slide, splash pads came out, as you know, at I think it was about 4:45 on Friday night. The province decided that they were opening up splash pads. So that was certainly a, not necessarily a surprise to us, but it was something that we had to react extremely quickly in order to get them opened. I had earlier sent an email to you that we couldn't commit to doing it, but I really have to commend, first of all, Parks and Open Space staff generally in their ability to open up the recreation facilities, first of all, so that the whole team of Parks and Open Space were out there doing that work. In particular, I'll name actually some people because I think as a council you may want to know this. Kyle Harrison and his team, and of course with the assistance of Tom Melville, were essential in getting the overall recreation facilities opened up. And a special shout out, because we have very few people that are actually qualified to open up our splash pads, came out on Saturday in order to get them open. So that's Dwayne McAllister, Dave Tilden, and Joseph Harper. So they came out, got 16 of our splash pads opened. The remaining splash pads either have repairs that we need to do to them, or they're brand new splash pads and we require public health to inspect them before we can actually open them. So we're working very closely with public health right now to make sure we can get even those new ones opened up. So it was a big thank you to them. So if we just go to the next slide, we're certainly continuing with our message about being kind. We're all in this together, and hopefully we're beginning to see a light at the end of the tunnel that we perhaps can really enjoy a summer. So with that, Council, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. And the first question comes from Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Jane, just a fantastic job over the weekend and being able to pivot to all the people you mentioned, and I know there are others as well. I just had a quick question on two quick questions. One is, have you seen an increase in vandalism? We've been having some issues at the Pine Glen where the splash pad is, and people breaking into one of the where the lighting is. Are you seeing that across the town, or is that kind of an isolated series of incidents of people hanging out? So that's my first question. And then the second is related to protocol for Parks and Rec staff when they're working outdoors, when they're working in close proximity. And I saw a group of folks today who were working on ball diamonds and getting those prepared because they're now open. Are they to be wearing masks as they're working in close proximity with each other, or is that not part of protocol?
So on the vandalism side, I don't think it's unique to Pine Glen. We have had other incidents of vandalism of other town property throughout the town. Actually, there's been in Ward 3 in particular, there's a building that we've had some challenges with. So I think it's a product of the youth and not having much to do. So they're looking for some other things to do. That may be contributing to it. But yes, we are seeing it throughout the town. In terms of masks, our requirements are that when they can't maintain the 6 meters or the 2 meters distance, the 6 feet, that we ask staff to wear their masks and protect each other. So we'll remind staff of those protocols that we have in place in terms of our playbook as we go forward.
And you haven't seen any incidents of outdoor Parks and Rec folks coming down with COVID? Most of the notifications have been people either indoors. I haven't seen anything with Parks and Rec, so I think those protocols are working then.
And in most cases, the cases that we have had within the town, there's been very few that have been transmitted through contact between staff. Most of the cases relate to community transition, just with their own transmission, just with their own social circles that they are within.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't hear Your Worship. I'm not sure if you called me next or not.
Sorry, Councillor Haslett Thiel next,
Okay.
but maybe she can't hear. I don't know.
Thank you, Mayor Burton.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Yes. So I have two questions and one comment. First of all, I echo everyone's thanks for how tremendously public-oriented all the staff were this weekend. It really was. It was great to hear and see. There seems to be some confusion of a parks ambassador versus municipal enforcement and the police. And it'd be appreciated if you could just take a few minutes to explain what the expectations are of a parks ambassador versus perhaps a police officer and other, because there are folks trying very hard to follow protocols, but they are seeing some behavior and some actions that they're wondering why they're not being dealt with. And I think it's a misunderstanding about what an ambassador does versus perhaps a police officer or municipal enforcement. So could you take a moment and explain that for us?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. The Parks Ambassadors are to be educators, to just remind people gently about the rules and requirements that are there. They're not there to charge or any way enforce the requirements. And in fact, we have emphasized that with the Parks Ambassadors because there's been quite a few incidences throughout municipalities where that has created a confrontation that was not necessary. So the Parks Ambassador's role is to educate, let them know what the requirements are, and then move on. If there is a significant issue, then there's always the ability to bring in either the Parks Patrol, which has an enforcement ability, or the bylaw enforcement officers. And if it accelerates or escalates, then the police are called. I think by law enforcement in very tense situations are going to be relying on the police predominantly, where there could be some issues of violence or increased tension. We do rely on the police in those cases. So it's an escalation level, actually. I think if you think it like that, the parks ambassadors on the bottom are educated, and each level we escalate up, with the police being the most important for the enforcement of serious issues.
Madam CAO, I think there's one other element that I hope council can help educate the public on. If you go to halton.ca and refer to the COVID information page, you'll find there a brief explanation of the masking bylaw. And there's a very important element, which is that because of the Charter of Rights, because of civil liberties, people are free to refuse to wear a mask and to claim a reason, and they are not required to provide proof. And so, I would urge people, as the region does on its website, to stay calm and be kind, and to understand that there are some people who are having great difficulty with this concept. They also have been subject to quite a lot of cross information, I'll call it, where many doctors are saying in public that the outdoors is safe. So there's a context in which our encounters with the public have to be understood, and I do hope that each member of council can help their constituents understand that, you know, we can't send the riot squad and glue a mask to somebody's face. So we focus, therefore, on education and on encouragement. And we hope for the best. And we also hope always for kindness. So thank you for letting me add that. Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, you said that a second question as well.
I do. It's and thank you for that additional comment, Mayor Burton. My other question is just around, I've seen on social media some of what the town is putting out, and I've had questions about picnicking and barbecuing in the parks. And there was some posting that talked about, you know, you're not supposed to be barbecuing in the park or bringing your barbecue equipment. Is there signage, or are the parks ambassadors sort of educating folks on this isn't a picnic park, or you know, you're not supposed to be bringing in 8-foot tables to set up your you know, your dinner hour? Are there restrictions in that regard, or are all the parks considered the same in terms of use? I just would like some clarification on that.
So I will ask Colleen or even Doug Carr to step in. My understanding is the requirements allow you to get 4 friends together, 4 of your friends together, in order to have a gathering. In the requirements, and Colleen can clarify. Or Doug, if Doug is on, actually.
Jane, do you want me to start?
There's Doug. Maybe he can clarify in terms of the order or requirements.
Oh, yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Oh, terrific, yes. So I guess there's a couple of elements here. One is the park bylaw, and I might get Colleen to comment on that. She's probably more familiar with whatever restrictions may be in there. In terms of the order, the CEO has identified it correctly. The latest revisions to the orders allow for a maximum of 5 people for an outdoor gathering, excluding family members. So more than that can be family members, but non-household members, the limit is 5. But it doesn't speak, the order does not speak to barbecue activities or anything like that. It just speaks in terms of number of people who may gather. I don't know, Colleen, did you have anything further?
Simply that people are required to use the barbecue pits that we provide, or the barbecue grills we provide, and not bring their own barbecues. Because what was happening last year was people were bringing their own barbecues, and then they were inappropriately disposing of, you know, the hot briquettes. So one thing we did last year, which we will be doing again this year, is we will be having a fire prevention staff go out and again provide an educational component to residents so that they understand the importance of fire safety. And that really made a difference. People responded very well to them, and in many cases didn't realize that they were actually creating a fire hazard.
Thank you for those clarifications.
All right, we're going next to Councillor Beth Robertson.
Hi, this probably is for Colleen then. This is just a quick follow-up in terms of picnic tables. Will they be set up this year then for people to use with small groups? I would think that would be very nice. And that goes to Janet's piece about people bringing long tables. Will we have our picnic tables set up?
So through you, Mr. Chair, last year we had a lot of problems with people moving picnic tables close together and creating large groups. So one thing we ended up doing was chaining them so that people couldn't actually use them. So what we will be doing is reviewing what new stage we're in, and we'll be looking at appropriate signage, and we will configure picnic tables accordingly. So you will see a relaxing of the rules and how we configure parks furniture depending on the stage that we're actually in.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going next to Councillor Lischina.
Councillor O'Meara was before me, but hopefully he's okay. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, Jane. That was actually quite a bit of good news. So I echo everybody's comments about splash pads. The Ward 6 ones are really heavily used. So thank you to all the staff for that. So a couple of questions. Based on the opening there, when would Town Hall then open, according to that schedule? Is it?
Actually, maybe Doug can answer that. I didn't really, let me back up. Town Hall could actually open at any time. It's not a provincial requirement that we close it. The reason we had looked at closing it during the stay-at-home order was because it is a stay-at-home order, and we can provide all the services that someone would come into Town Hall, either by appointment, so they can come in, for example, such things like wedding certificates or the commissionaires, the oaths for the commissioners, we could do by appointment, and all other services were provided online. So given the stay-at-home order, we chose to close Town Hall. As we move through the steps, we'll look at reopening Town Hall, at least to the Service Oakville, which would probably be our first step. And then consider how we open the balance of it as we move through the steps.
So do you think in the first stage then, in that first 60%?
I think coverage? As we move into that first step one, we'll look at reopening the Service Oakville.
Okay. Next, do we have our full complement of our outdoor staff with respect to cutting grass?
We have moved to get the full complement of staff. And if Colleen is on again, I'll ask her whether or not that has all been retained. But we had looked at moving, because the grass needs to be cut. We also knew that sanitation was a continuing issue. So even the part-time staff we were beginning to hire and get on scale. Things like pools and those kinds of things that are not yet open, we may be holding back. But generally for outdoor facilities, Colleen, please confirm if I'm correct, we have pretty well all of our staff back on schedule.
Yes, we do, and we're working with a combination of our regular full-time complement. There is some redeployed staff from recreation right now, and we also are onboarding our full complement of students. One thing that we have done is that we have reconfigured a couple of our teams to address some of the more urgent issues that we experienced from last year. I'm thinking specifically of litter. So we have established a specialized litter crew who goes around because we're really noticing once again that people are doing all kinds of dumping from household items to personal PPE. And so we're looking very closely at trying to address that as best we can.
Okay, great. I did actually observe some onboarding today during my ride in one of the trails, which brings me to the next point. I'm an avid walker and ride my bike as well, and I'm noticing more and more people with their dogs off leash in the trails. And I can tell you that some of them are not very nice when you say, please put your dog on a leash. And so I'm just wondering, is there anything that is going to be different this year with respect to providing additional? I'm sure people know, because obviously when you're entering the park or the trail, there's a big sign. Should we have any additional signs within the trails? I'm at a loss on that one.
Well, it's something, so that's an issue that has come up several times with all of our avid hikers and walkers. And so we are looking at different types of communication strategies that we could employ to try and encourage people. But we have had quite a bit of dumping, unfortunately, on our trails with excrement.
Is there any way, we have a list of people who have dog licenses, right? Is there any way that we could send them periodic emails or something to just keep reminding them of these different issues that are happening?
So, Councillor Jenna, I'm going to suggest we take that as a offline, just to see what we can do in order to increase that. It is enforcement staff to a great extent, as well as the parks enforcement side that deals with that. And so it's a matter of balancing their resources. So let's look what we can do on communication and signage and enforcement in order to try and get that issue a little more effectively.
Yeah, I think, Councillor, that you correctly noted that the dog owners are aware that they're breaking the bylaw. So extra signs won't change their behavior. A little enforcement might, but that's about it, I think. Thank you for those questions. We'll go now to Councillor O'Meara. Thank you for your patience, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks again, Jane, for everything that's going on. And Commissioner Bell, yeah, the more garbage cans and recycling points we can have in our parks, the better. And I saw the images of Cherry Beach on the weekend and was aghast at that. And it was something that I can't wrap my head around. But thanks for that, Jane. I guess my question is, in terms of the province's opening plan, it's at 60% of first doses have been administered. But is that, so no matter what happens, we're not getting into phase 1 until June 14th, regardless of the fact that we're almost at 60% right now? Am I to understand that correctly?
I'm never going to suggest that the province will follow strictly the rules that they have put down, because that hasn't proven to date. So their requirements are really looking at the vaccine level and some other health indicators. So whenever we hit that 60% and the health indicators are in a good level, I could see that I would predict that we could certainly be there before the 14th.
Okay, yeah, and I asked that because I'm trying to do the impossible and get some predictability for a lot of our restaurant owners who are getting flowers in their planters, have got their patios out, and then they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs going, okay, like what is the go time here? And I'm asked all the time, obviously, and the answer is it could happen at any point because I don't know, doesn't really bode well. But so I guess my question is, as of now, though, as we understand it, at 7:24 p.m. on May 25th, it's June 14th is the first time before we will be able to have 4 people outside at a patio table. Is that correct?
Their estimate was June 14th was when they'd hit the 60%. So that was their expectation. And
okay,
that was
and there's
in
nothing
the
that we've read in the plan that rolled out that said that could change if we hit early. That's not in there, buried somewhere in the fine print somewhere?
So I'll say again that June 14th was the date they expected to be at 60%. But the triggers that are set out in the steps are you hit the 60% and you meet the health indicators in order to move to the next step. The only requirement they put in there, if you're moving from step 1 to step 2, there's a minimum, they did say a minimum of 21 days. So I can't say for certain that June 14th is the absolute date. It is up to the province, but they left language in there that would give some leeway that they could actually do something sooner than that.
Okay, and we're still working with our restaurant partners to keep them abreast of the convoluted language so that they can get as much, hopefully they can get more time than our park staff got to open the splash pads up. So as long as we can be that conduit, I appreciate that.
Certainly, we are through our Economic Development Department for certain.
Thank you, Your Worship.
I'll just caution everybody, the same language that the CAO just quoted and other health indicators gives them room to make it later than June 14th.
Yes.
As well. So, look, the province, to echo the CAO a few minutes ago, what hasn't the province changed at the last minute or, so, and also there's another wild card in the story. The mayors, we meet regularly, the mayors of Ontario, and if everybody has hit 60% and we look like we're meeting their health indicators before the 14th, I know that the mayors will be passing a joint statement and sending it off, asking them to act sooner. I mean, it's happened every time, so it's bound to happen again. Thank you, Councillor, for your questions. Councillor Knoll and then Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Worship. And without sounding repetitive, I also want to thank everybody for their great work this weekend. I was stunned at the level of quickness that they were able to achieve, and I've had lots of positive feedback from families in Ward 5. So thank you. My question actually relates to families in Ward 5 and across Oakville, and that is, what are the, are there more details around the plan for day camps this summer in terms of numbers and the plan for offering those up to the community?
So as we understand, based on the provincial requirement, day camps can open as part of step 2. The province is putting out some additional guidelines and we haven't yet received those. But we are getting prepared right now to be able to move on day camps on the basis of the guidelines that we had last year. And I feel confident that we can adapt to what other further guidelines the province may come out with. So we're actually looking at the step 1 and the step 2 because we don't know when the announcement's going to come in a lot of cases, so that we're well prepared to move into each one of those steps really quickly.
Is there any sort of waitlisting happening or sign-up list so people can be contacted when the time comes?
I'd ask Colleen Bell if she could deal with that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO. We've already opened registration for camp based on the camp capacity restrictions that were in place last year. At this point in time, the registrations are almost full. We have, well, it's not all camp, the lion's share of camp, so we have almost 3,000 registrations already. So families are very eager to get their children into camp. We have also established waiting lists as well, which will be reviewed depending on what the new camp guidelines come out with. We are hoping that the capacity limits will actually go up a little bit so that then we can start to address waiting lists. But I would recommend that if people are interested in registering their kids, to get their names on the waiting list, because we may be able to get some movement on that depending on what the guidelines are.
So can I clarify, there are 3,000 registrations to date. Does that mean there are 3,000 spaces throughout the course of the summer based on last year's capacities? What would our normal capacity?
Most of them are already full.
Okay. What would our traditional capacity be? So if it's 3,000 based on last year's numbers, what would it normally be for the course of the summer?
Oh, we would do about 11,000 registrations normally.
So if things lighten up in terms of the regulations, there will be lots of opportunities for families to participate. That's great news. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Noel. Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you to staff for working around the clock to ensure that our outdoor facilities were open as soon as possible. It was a real treat to have the splash pads open over the long weekend. My question is around splash pads, and I'm wondering if there's any opportunity to change the timing on the splash pads from opening at 10 a.m. to 9 a.m. or even 9:30 a.m., just with more residents using outdoor facilities and trying to beat the crowd and get out early. I wonder if we could open our splash pad facilities earlier. Is that something staff can look into or comment on?
I think
So,
we can, go ahead,
sorry,
Colleen.
Jane.
I was just going to suggest that we could look into extended hours to see what's possible and the staffing implications of that. So as soon as we've got a solution to that, we'll certainly be updating you and updating the website as well so that you'll see the extended hours at that point in time.
Oh, thank you. That would be so great. And then I just had another question about community cleanups, actually. And I know Doug just went over the new rules and that 5 people are allowed outdoors. And I've had some requests come in from community members that want to organize small cleanups around our parks and trails and commercial areas. And I'm wondering, is that something that is allowed, and is the town now providing the supplies? I know in the past we do give out the bags and the gloves upon request from residents. So just wondering if there's an update on that. I know it was temporarily paused due to the stay-at-home order.
Yeah, I know last year we had provided a lot of services. So Colleen, if you could deal with that question, that would be great.
So we did get your request, Councillor, and that's currently under review in terms of how we might safely reinstate that. So we'll be sending out a communication shortly on that.
Okay, so even if staff, the town is not providing bags and gloves, is it okay to tell residents that yes, you can get together with your neighbor and clean up your community park within groups of 5?
So my suggestion would be that they should really look at what the regulations are with respect to gathering and whether or not they would be in close proximity to each other. And also the fact that we do have a lot of residents who watch gatherings very closely. And if they notice that there are groups getting too close together, they'll end up reporting them to municipal enforcement. So we want to be thoughtful about that. That's why I would suggest that we wait and have an opportunity to review that.
Yeah, if I can just remind what Doug had said, it's 5 people getting together who are non-household members. So that's the size of the gathering that they're contemplating at this point in time.
Thank you.
So to try to help with that, it seems to me that our constituents could do this in groups of no larger than 5. And if they're phoned in by concerned observers, Service Oakville will tell them, no, 5 is okay. Mm-hmm. So it'll work out, yeah. I think. We need to get after the litter. It's horrible what, COVID has really changed some behavior for the worse around litter. I think we all have seen. Do you have other questions, Councillor Palmer?
No, that's everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have a hand from Commissioner Bell.
I just wanted to say on behalf of the Parks and Open Space team, how much we appreciate the volunteer cleanup efforts that have gone on in previous years, and they were a huge help last year. So from a staff perspective, we'll be very eager to get this started as safely as we can. So I just wanted to send that shout out to all of our thoughtful residents who really care about the beauty of our parks and trails.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor O'Meara, your electronic hand is up. Can I capitalize on that by asking you to move receipt of the information? Thank you. Any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The motion carries. Council, we now have some very good news, and Jonathan van der Heijden, our Deputy Treasurer and Director of Finance, is here to deliver it. and namely the 2020 Financial Statements Report. I'll give the headline. When you consider how much we fear, how bad we feared this could be, I think everybody will be relieved to hear how well it turned out. Mr. Vanderheiden, Mr. Director.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mayor Burton, for that introduction. I am here before you this evening to address the next two items on the agenda, which first is the 2020 consolidated financial statements for the town, along with the 2020 trust financial statements. And then the second item is the receipt of the audit findings report from our external auditors from KPMG. And their items are found on page 186 of your agenda. I'll start with a few words on the financial statements themselves before I actually introduce KPMG. And the first item I'd like to mention is that the town is required to prepare annual financial statements, which then must be audited and then must be approved by council, which is why I'm here tonight. And the financial statements are consolidated, which means that they contain the results for the town itself, as well as the local business improvement areas and Oakville Public Library. And those entities also produce their own financial statements, which are also audited, and they have been or will be approved by their various boards as well. In order to prepare the financial statements each year, the Finance Department undertakes a year-end process to ensure that all financial activity for the year has been appropriately captured and recorded. As part of this process, Finance must ensure that all the activity is recorded in accordance with public sector accounting standards. And these are the accounting standards that the town and many other government entities must follow in reporting their financial results. And it's important to say that these are very different than the budget, the way we build our budget. So because of that difference, we do include in our staff report tonight Appendix C, which shows the difference between the budget format and the audited format and helps to reconcile the difference between the surplus after council has approved all of the reserve transfers, how that surplus reconciles with the results in the audited statements that you see tonight. We don't have time to go over each item in that reconciliation, but if anyone is ever interested in doing this, I'd be happy to walk them through all those details. To dive into the financial statements themselves, I'd like to have you turn to Appendix A of the staff report and take a look at page 132 of the council package. That's where it begins. And actually, I said page 132. I should say page 134. This is a statement that's called Management's Responsibility for the Consolidated Financial Statements. And this reminds any user of our financial statements that they are indeed the responsibility of management, that is us as the town, not of our auditors. The second item is the auditor's report, which is on the next page, page 2 of financial statements. And I don't want to steal too much thunder from KPMG, but I do want to highlight that this is their audit opinion, and I'm happy to say that it is an unqualified or clean audit opinion, and I'll let them speak to the rest of those details in a minute. Moving to the balance sheet, or the statement of financial position, and this is on page 5 of the audited statements, which is 138 in your agenda. There are a couple of items I'd like to highlight for you here. So the first section is for our financial assets, and the town's financial assets have grown from last year by over $80 million. And this can be most obviously seen in the increases in our receivables and our investments, and there's more explanations about those items included in the staff report. On the liability side of the ledger, the town's liabilities have also increased by approximately $25 million. And the primary reason for this increase is due to our obligatory reserve funds, which you'll see as the third line under our liabilities. Obligatory reserve funds are the funds that we receive for development charges and for gas tax funds, and the balances fluctuate depending on the receipt of funds and how we actually use those items. In 2020, the town received more funds than we actually used for capital projects, and this is not abnormal given the nature of both the DC funds and the projects to which they relate. It's also important to note that the town invests these funds, and that's also why our investment assets have increased from last year, which you saw in the financial asset section. Altogether, the town's net financial asset position is $379 million, which means that the town has sufficient resources to fund our obligations, and that is a good thing. Like you said, it's a good news story. We're in a strong financial position. In addition to this, you'll see our tangible capital assets. They are now worth more than $1.8 billion. And our total accumulated surplus is now over $2.2 billion. And as I say every year, keep in mind that doesn't mean we have $2.2 billion in the bank. This is what our accumulated surplus is. And in a minute, I'll get to the note that describes a little bit more as to what makes up the details for that balance. Now, if I have you turn to the next page, the income statement or the statement of operations. So again, this is page 6 or 139 of your agenda. You'll see that this statement has 3 columns. The first is for the budget. The second is for the actual results from 2020. And the third are the actual results from 2019 last year. So the results for the year are broken down by the type of revenue in the revenue section and by the nature of the expenses in the expense section. And I'm not going to go through each line, but there are a few things that I'd like to highlight for you. On the revenue side, taxation revenue, our first line, has increased by $7 million from last year and exceeded budget by $1 million due to our supplementary tax bills. The next line has our user fees, and you'll notice that this one is both under budget and is much less than last year. In fact, it's down from $18 million from last year. And that's largely driven by the effects of the pandemic on our services. And more details on that can be found in note 13, and I'll touch on that in a minute as well. Going down a few more rows, there's one called Province of Ontario. You'll notice that that balance for 2020 was almost $8.3 million, and that's due to the Safe Restart funding that they have provided to the town. The last item on the revenues that I'd like to point out is an item I mention every year, and that's our developer contributions line, which is a pretty significant line. It's called Developer Contributions and Charges Earned. And they were $93 million for 2020, which is a large number, and it's up $15 million from last year. However, this line includes both the use of the funds provided by developers, but it also includes the value of the tangible capital assets that they provide to the town. So think of the infrastructure that they provide to us, they give to us when they complete a subdivision. And this contributed amount of assets represents $61 million for 2020 and $45 million for 2019. And you can see how that explains both the large value as well as the increase year over year. On the expense side of things, the comments in the staff report address most of the changes in the balances. However, I did want to highlight the decrease in the rec and culture line that you can see there, which decreased year over year again due to the effects of the pandemic. And this is also where I like to throw in my annual reminder about the difference of amortization. The audited financial statements factor in amortization of our tangible capital assets, something our budget process does not do. And since amortization is almost $50 million a year for the town, that can skew those kind of comparisons. Just a word of warning as you go through that. It brings us to our final bottom line of an annual surplus of $131 million, which again, as you mentioned earlier, Mayor Burton, the town is in a good financial state. There are a few notes to the financial statements that I'd like to touch on. Turning to page 142, I won't go through all of them. But the first one is on page 148. And this one is entitled Investment in Oakville Municipal Development Corporation. This is note 4. And it's followed by note 5, which deals with Oakville Enterprises Corporation, or Oakville Hydro. And these are 2 government business enterprises that we are the sole shareholder of. And the information contained here is a summary of their financial information. Flipping a few more pages to page 153, we get to note 6, which is the obligatory reserve funds that I referred to earlier. And here you can see how the various funds that we've received and how we've used them. Flipping down a little bit more to page 156 of your agenda, which is note 10. This includes information about the town's employment benefit obligations. So we have 2 employment benefit obligations. One is for our post-employment benefits, so think about health and dental benefits for people after they retire, and the other is for our WSIB benefits. And each year we work with actuarial firms to calculate the value of these liabilities and the information that we have to disclose here. Earlier I had mentioned the accumulated surplus and the details on it, and that can be found on note 12, which is on page 162. And this is where I mentioned the $2.2 billion. And here you can see that much of the value in that number is related to the net book value of our tangible capital assets. And it also includes our investment in Oakville Hydro, or Oakville Enterprises Corporation, various unspent capital funds, as well as our reserves and our reserve fund balances. The last item I'd like to bring to your attention is note 13, which is on page 163. And this note breaks out the detail for the town's various user fees. And again, you'll see here that both transit and rec and culture fees have dropped significantly due to the pandemic. So these are all of the items that I wanted to highlight for you on the town's consolidated financial statements. But I thought Before I move on to the trust financial statements, I was wondering if there were any questions on the town's financial statements.
Thank you, Mr. Van der Heijden. Councillor Liz Chinna is first out of the blocks.
Thank you, Your Worship. Jonathan, I want to congratulate you and your staff on all the hard work through the year and finally through this audit process. I'm not sure, maybe it's there and I just didn't see it, but so there's a dividend payment to the town of 6.1 million from Oakville Enterprises. Is that the amount that goes towards the hospital? And is it the full amount or a partial amount towards what the town has basically owes towards our portion of the hospital?
So you're right, we did receive $6.1 million as a dividend from Oakville Hydro, and we do receive that money and include it in our operations for the year. It is not tied specifically to the hospital debt payment, but we do treat it in that manner. There's no actual connection, but that's how we've used it. The time frames aren't quite the same on them.
Okay, so even for this pandemic year, we did actually put that full dividend towards the hospital, or no?
Oh, we certainly still made our debt payment to the hospital. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I would just, I don't want to put the director on the spot, but the debt service on the hospital note is less than the amount of the dividend from Oakville Enterprises. I think that little note of clarity is probably important in the exchange that you just had, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I would encourage you to go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. So the next item that we have to approve tonight, that you have to approve tonight, is for our trust financial statements for 2020, and those were included as Appendix B to the staff report. And they start on page 174 of the agenda. And there's not too much that I need to say about the trust financial statements. These financial statements relate to the activities for the various trust funds that the town maintains. And page 179 of the agenda has their statement of operations. And this shows the activity by the type of fund, and you can see there that the town holds funds in trust for the cemeteries, for the Halton Information Providers, which is part of the library, or it's a library-related initiative, as well as for various boating and sports clubs. The purpose of those last two groups is to hold funds to make sure that we have adequate funds in the event of the demolition of the club facilities that they have on town land, and there's separate agreements for each of those. And as you can see in that statement, most of these items are quite limited. Many of them have very few transactions for the year, but they are an important part of the financials that the town has to maintain. So I'd be happy to take any questions on those items as well before I pass it along to KPMG.
Councillor Liz Chinna has at least one question for you.
This one, and this is, I probably should know this. These trust funds are also, I guess, they're invested. All the funds are invested. So normally you wouldn't state how much of a return they're at, or either plus or minus. That does not go into these statements. I mean, realized or unrealized.
So hopefully I can answer your question. I think there's two parts to it. So the first item is they certainly are invested. The funds that we do receive for these trusts are invested, and they are part of the town's overall investment portfolio in terms of generating a return. So they would experience the same ups and downs that our portfolio would experience. Does that help?
It does, but so just to clarify, they do not, that portion stating what the unrealized gain or realized gain is, because I don't want to say loss, but would not be stated in these statements then?
No, it's not specifically stated.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Director Van der Heijden, we look to you if you have any concluding remarks.
The only other thing I'd like to say is I'd be happy to introduce KPMG to present their audit findings report if you'd like me to do that now, or wait for approval of these financials first.
I think you gave such a good report. You're owed approval of your part, or your parts now. Councillor Liz Chinna leaps to provide the motion. Is there any objection? Councillor Hasletiel, do you have a question? All right, there's no objection. Councillor Liz Chinna's motion is on the floor. Any objection? Madam Clerk, seeing none, that motion carries, and the financial statements for the town and the trust funds are approved. And now we turn our attention to our audit findings report. And Director, I imagine you'd like to introduce our auditors.
Yes, we are joined this evening by Carlos Alvarez as our audit partner from KPMG and Matt Chiardelli, who's the audit manager and has worked closely with us throughout the entire audit process. So I can turn it over to them for their presentation.
And we can see
Thank
them.
you, and
And we can hear them, so welcome.
thank you, and good evening, Your Worship and fellow council members. Matt and I will go through the audit findings report, and just like your fantastic financial results, I would also like to report that the audit went very smoothly this year. We're getting used to this. This is the second year that we've done the audit essentially remotely and virtually. And so within the package, fully appreciating that this would have been pre-circulated, we will focus in on just a few areas of the report. And if we can begin on page 5 of the findings report, which, Jonathan, I'm not sure if you want to show on screen, but that would be well further back in your package. It is the slide that would be entitled Executive Summary. I'll just give you a minute to load that on screen.
Sorry, Carlos, I don't actually have the ability to share that. I'm not sure if the clerk's department has that ready or not, but I do know all members of council have their packages there. So
we can speak to it. Certainly from an audit standpoint, happy to report that when we executed the audit, there were no changes from the audit plan that we originally presented to council. In terms of the audit process, we are substantially complete, certainly barring the approval of the financial statements, which, I see there's a hand up. Councillor Longo.
I think if you go ahead and let me chair, I think it'll all turn out for the best.
Yeah, sure.
So Carlos, in the background, we're trying to get the technical expertise going here to put your slide up, and but I'm not getting any high signs from the folks in the back. So I would ask you, Mr. Alvarez, to continue.
Sure. So in terms of finalizing the audit, we are certainly complete. Happy to report that we did not identify any uncorrected audit differences, and more importantly, we did not identify any corrected audit differences. I think that is a good reflection of the quality of the books and records that were provided to us, in which we audited. Also, in terms of independence, we are required to report to you at least annually on independence. We as KPMG have not provided any advisory or tax services that would threaten our independence. So we are able to sign the clean audit opinion under full independence from the town. Moving along, it is important for us to mention the impacts of COVID. I would like to remind everyone that COVID-19 impacts audits in two ways. Number one is the impact on your revenues and your operations, but there's also the potential impact on your internal control environment. So what that means is, from an audit standpoint, we do challenge management and look at whether or not any of the processes have changed, whether it be controls around procurement, check requisitions, cash payments, etc. And happy to report that there were no control deficiencies of any sort that we detected as part of our audit, nor did we have to change our audit approach. Other items to highlight from an audit standpoint are around the topic of fraud. Just as a reminder, here in Canada, we are required to formally respond to the risk of fraud. And it's very important that we report to you our findings. Based on all of our work around revenues, journal entries, and the risk of management override, I am happy to report that all of the transactions that we examined as part of the audit were all above board, and there was no actual or suspected fraud that came to our attention. The remainder of the findings report would go into what I would call the nuts and bolts of the audit. Again, I would like to reiterate that the audit went very smoothly. We had no issues in auditing any of the revenues, operating expenses, as well as any items on the balance sheet. One of the items that is important to recognize is that we received the full cooperation of your management team. It was a great tone from the top. They were very supportive of the audit process and also extremely responsive. Within the audit findings report, it's a few years down the road, but there is a slide that provides a high-level summary of some of the accounting standards that will become effective a few years from now. Because of the impacts of COVID-19, those who set these standards in Canada have deferred some of these standards by one additional year. So that does provide you as the town additional time to get prepared for some of these new audit standards, which are significant down the road. Okay. Understanding that, again, because this would be already included in your package, the only other item that I would like to highlight is, as part of the audit, we do rely on some of your specialists, your management experts, which would include the actuary. The employee future benefit liability is significant to the town. You do utilize the actuary to assist you in that process. We have looked at all of the key assumptions that were used by the actuary, and we are very comfortable that the assumptions and the data that were used were reasonable. So with that, I will pause there. And to summarize, it was a good, clean audit, and I certainly will be prepared to sign the independent auditor's report.
Thank you very much. There appears to be at least one question. Let me just check. Earlier, you thought there was a question from Councillor Longo. Councillor Longo, do you have a question?
No, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Lischina then.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to lower my hand before it gets stuck there. Thank you very much to KPMG for all your work with our staff. They're great to work with, so we agree. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the executive summary section under the, I guess, page 5 for control deficiencies. Do you have a cyber expert on your team, or do you ever need to call upon one for to determining if there's any computer security issues, especially during the pandemic, given what's happened?
Generally, as part of the financial statement audit, we would only bring in our IT advisory individuals on a as-needed basis if we came across a deficiency that we encountered. Generally, clients who use those IT services almost use them as a value add and an add-on. But based on the audit procedures that we concluded on, we did not feel the need to bring in those specialized IT resources to supplement the audit process.
Good to hear. My next question is changes from the audit plan. So you did present to us an audit plan and how much it would cost and all those details. What I noticed going through the report, and I'm just going to stick to the executive summary because the more details are further down, but there's a number of spots where you say, more effort, more time, higher level staff were required. So I'm assuming our contract is based on what we signed for the cost of the audit. There's no additional costs as a result of this, based on what I read in this report?
You are correct.
Okay.
happy
And
to
is that your subtle way of saying next year we might need to charge you more because look at all this time we're spending?
Not at all. I think there
okay,
are.
good to hear. I'm glad to hear that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Mr. Alvarez, you see, she was really just negotiating for us for next year. All right, Councillor Chinna, can I prevail upon you for the necessary motion to that the 2020 audit findings report issued by KPMG, the town's external auditor, be received for information? Thank you. Is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Council, we have next the notice of motion from last council meeting on the gas-fired electricity generation phase-out movement. And we have a few delegations registered. And I thought we would do this item now in consideration of their time. And then at the completion of this item, it will probably be close to 2 hours that we've been meeting, and I would offer you a brief break, a bio break or a drink break, tea or coffee, whatever you need. And if that meets with your approval, I will now I'll ask the clerk to call the registered delegations. Madam Clerk?
The first registered delegation is Mervyn Russell from the Halton Action for Climate Emergency Now.
Welcome, Mr. Russell. Council looks forward to your information.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So, Your Worship, and Honourable Councillors, town staff, and members of the public, as being mentioned, my name is Mervyn Russell. I'm a retired clergy person and a resident of Oakville, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Halton Action for Climate Emergency Now Hasten. Between 2009 and 2010, Oakville gained considerable publicity. This happened because the residents of Oakville, with the support of this council, the federal MP, the MPP, plus all the candidates of all the other parties of the upcoming election, said that building a large gas-fueled power plant in Oakville was a development that they did not want. The major reason was the additional particulates which should have been released into the atmosphere, which already had a high particulate content. So high, in fact, that public health authorities said Halton had the highest incidence in Ontario of asthma among children aged between 12 and 19. In fact, I remember the esteemed Stephen Dankiewicz and myself hearing in a private meeting with the then medical officer of health that if it was any other kind of illness other than those affecting breathing, he will have been obliged to announce an epidemic. Therefore, to be consistent, Oakville Town Council should vote in favour of phasing out gas-fueled power plants. Not only would increasing the output of Ontario's 12 gas-fueled power plants, one of which, of course, is in our region, not only would that cause more breathing problems and hence unhealthy development, particularly for children, but according to the independent energy systems operator, the increased level of energy production would add 300% more carbon-based emissions into the atmosphere. Ontario is at present a world leader in the greenness of its energy grid. This was achieved by shuttering our coal-burning power plants. Increasing the output of our 12 gas-powered plants would ruin that significant achievement. According to the Ontario Auditor General, it would mean adding approximately between 11 and 12 million tons of carbon to what is presently emitted. In addition, the methane gas that is emitted through the venting and flaring processes of accessing natural gas by fracking must be taken into account, remembering that methane blankets the atmosphere 20 times more than carbon dioxide. A more unhelpful and irresponsible development as regards Canada achieving its Paris Accord climate goal would be difficult to imagine, particularly when we bear in mind the dire consequences to the livability of our planet of failing to meet those emission reduction targets. We should not be increasing the output of gas-fueled power plants, not only because they're unhealthy and because to do so would be highly irresponsible, but we should not be increasing them because it is unnecessary to do so. There are better alternatives for meeting the increased demand for electricity that the next decade is going to bring through an enlarged population and the electrification of vehicles. According to the Independent Energy Supply Operator, gas-fueled power plants only provide about 7% of Ontario's energy needs. This proportion is due mainly to providing backup supplies during peak demand periods. Quebec is in the market to sell hydroelectric power in North America. It's involved in major negotiations with northeastern states in the USA. It already supplies Ontario with additional electricity during high summer, using the existing grid infrastructure. Quebec has indicated it would be interested in a year-round contract with this province. Its prices are considerably cheaper than the unit costs of our nuclear power stations, which at present are the main providers of our electricity supply. At the same time, renewable energy sources supply 9% of our energy and at cheaper unit production rates than gas or oil power stations. Using made in Ontario renewable electricity in conjunction with that from Quebec Hydro, along with robust programs to reduce energy consumption, such as is being attempted in Oakville's community energy strategy, the 7% of energy produced by gas-fueled power plants will not only be phased out, but be replaced by an increased supply of electricity, whilst at the same time bringing about the development of a new industry, using skills that Ontario has aplenty, and providing well-paying jobs. This is the way of the future. If this was not possible, the IESO would not be conducting a public survey to find out which way of doing it has the greatest amount of public support. Phasing out gas-fueled power plants is the next step in increasing the greenness of Ontario's electricity grid. There are better alternatives than burning this carbon-based, carbon-emitting fuel. Alternatives that are healthier, more environmentally responsible, which are cheaper, and which provide new, lasting, well-paid jobs. Let us join Halton Hills, Burlington, Hamilton, Mississauga, Toronto, and others in supporting this resolution, and then I would hope promoting it in the Council of the Region of Halton. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you, Mr. Russell, for your information. I believe Councillor Lischina has a question for you. Is that correct, Councillor? You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Russell, for your presentation. You made a note, because I read your report ahead of time as well, and you made a note about Quebec has indicated it would be interested in a year-round contract with this province, which obviously Ontario. We had a presentation from, forget the gentleman's name, but last council meeting, who indicated that it's not so easy to actually get electricity from Quebec, and in fact, it's minute amount that we're getting. We also got a letter from the Ontario Energy Association. I believe Mr. Brescia is here to present as well. And there is a report, it's the implications of shutting down Ontario gas-fired generators by 2030, which they indicate that Quebec is not really a feasible alternative for hydroelectricity. So I'm just curious, where's your information coming from about Quebec being such a good source of electricity or hydroelectricity for Ontario?
The Clean Air Alliance, which I think you're going to hear from as a deputation this evening.
I believe it was the Clean Air Alliance last time that presented. That was indicated that the amount coming would be so minute it could not replace what's needed here.
No, you had the EIESO, I think, perhaps. Is that what you're referring to? I don't recall a presentation by...
Perhaps. I got my letters all mixed up here.
But if I may just try and... I don't claim to be an expert in this area. I try to report what I think are remarks made by responsible organizations. But obviously, I mean, these gas fueled power stations have to be phased out. And I hear you mentioning the date of 2030, which gives, 9 years in which to do it. Obviously, there would have to be additional lines provided. I understand they could go through the same provision for conducting electricity that already exists. But I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that Quebec Hydro is interested in developing a contract with us. I think that's been the case for some time. And certainly, I mean, if they're interested in selling the surplus electricity to the northeastern states of the United States of America, I would have thought they would certainly be interested in selling it to Ontario, which is considerably nearer in many cases.
So my understanding, it is a transmission issue as well. And I just, your comment on the fact that the Ontario's electricity system represents 2% of the GHG emissions in the province. In stats, you could say that it's a floor effect compared to the transportation industry, buildings, even agriculture. So what's your thought on that?
Your 2% was referring to what, please?
So the Ontario's electricity system represents 2% of the greenhouse gases emissions in our province. You're aware of that, correct?
This is taking into account the emissions from the gas-fueled power plants. Is that what you're saying?
So the whole electricity system, yes.
Yes.
So, so I'm just making that comment because, if we're going for low-hanging fruit here, that would not be this electricity system.
Well, I think it's a question of, as I say, partly too, Councillor, I mean, there's a health issue as well. I must say when the gas power plant issue was going hot and heavy here in Oakville, I was very surprised to discover that we had one of the highest particulate level in Ontario and highest rates of asthma among certain sections of our children. So there's also a health concern, but I think anything that we are doing to move away from carbon-based energy supply is something that we should be encouraging, particularly if it's only producing what is a kind of intermittent supply at the present time. We need to move into the...
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, Mr. Russell. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Jack Gibbons from the Clean Air Alliance, and there's a PowerPoint for Mr. Gibbons.
Well, let's see if we have better luck with this PowerPoint than the last one. Good. Welcome, Mr. Gibbons. Council looks forward to your information.
Can you hear me?
We hear you perfectly. Please feel welcome to proceed.
Okay. Mayor Burton and members of council, I'm Jack Gibbons from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you tonight about your motion about phasing out our gas-fired power plants. The Ontario Clean Air Alliance was created in 1997 to promote the phase out of our 5 dirty coal-fired power plants. We worked on that issue for 17 years until the last coal plant was closed in April 2014. And now we're working on the next step to clean up our electricity grid, namely to move to a 100% carbon-free electricity grid by 2030 by phasing out our gas-fired power plants. Next slide, please. Now, this slide shows the historic and forecast greenhouse gas pollution from our electric power plants, and it goes from 2005 to 2040. And the good news is that thanks to the coal phase out, the greenhouse gas pollution from our power plants fell by 93% between 2005 and 2017. But since 2017, the pollution from our power plants is starting to rise again. And according to the IESO, or Independent Electricity System Operator, the pollution from our power plants is forecast to rise by more than 300% by 2030 and by 500% or more by 2040. And if this occurs, we will lose about 40% of the pollution reduction benefits that we achieved by phasing out dirty coal. Next slide, please. Now, there are 3 main reasons why the IESO is forecasting this large increase in pollution from the gas plants. The first is that they are forecasting that the demand for electricity in Ontario will grow by about 1% a year. The second reason is that they're forecasting that the Pickering nuclear station will close in 2025. And the third reason is because the government of Ontario is planning to meet virtually all of our need for new electricity supply over the next 20 years by simply ramping up the output of our gas-fired power plants. That is, they're planning to simply import more fracked gas from Western Canada and Pennsylvania to ramp up the gas plants. Next slide, please. Now, as I think you all know, Ontario has a climate target. It's to reduce the province's greenhouse gas pollution by 30% by 2030. But according to the Auditor General, we're not on track to achieving that target. But here's the good news. If we phase out the gas plants, that will provide us with all or virtually all of the extra pollution reductions Ontario needs to achieve its 2030 climate target. And that's where we're calling for a gas plant phase out by 2030, because it's the easiest and lowest cost option for Ontario to achieve its climate target. And by phasing out the gas plants, we will also make it easier for the town of Oakville to achieve its climate targets. Next slide, please. Now, we're proposing a 3-pronged strategy to phase out the gas plants. The first prong is energy efficiency investments to reduce the demand for electricity and hence the need for the gas plants. The second prong is to import more low-cost water power from Quebec. Quebec has a huge surplus of water power from its existing hydro stations. Most of this water power is exported to the US, mostly on the spot market, mostly at low prices. So we say some of these exports should be diverted to Ontario to help us phase out our gas plants. Now, to respond to a councillor's question, last year we got about 3% of our electricity from Quebec water power. But with our existing transmission lines, we could triple our imports of Quebec water power tomorrow. So we do have capacity to import more water power, triple our imports, but to achieve a complete phase out of all of our gas plants by 2030, we are recommending that we expand our transmission links with Quebec so we can import even more water power from Quebec. Now, the third prong is wind and solar energy. Now, we all know wind and solar used to be a very high cost source of electricity, but thanks to huge technological progress, wind and solar are now our lowest cost sources of new electricity supply. Next slide, please. An additional benefit of investing in energy efficiency and wind and solar is that they can create jobs in every single community in Ontario. On the other hand, if we meet our needs by simply importing fracked gas from Western Canada and Pennsylvania, that will create 0 new jobs in Ontario. Now, we all know that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. So wind and solar need a backup or storage option. And that's why Ontario is so lucky to be located right next door to Quebec, because Quebec's huge hydroelectric reservoirs can act like a giant battery for our wind and solar. So by integrating our wind and solar with Quebec's hydroelectric reservoirs, we can convert wind and solar into a firm 24/7 source of baseload electricity for Ontario. Next slide, please. Now, this slide shows the costs of Ontario's carbon-free electricity options. The lowest cost options are on the left-hand side. And the good news is that the options we're promoting to phase out the gas plants, namely energy efficiency, Quebec water power, solar power, onshore wind, are now our lowest cost options to phase out the gas plants. And to see that, I ask you to look at the yellow bar graph in the middle with 9.6 cents on top of it. That is the price we're paying to Ontario Power Generation today for nuclear electricity. And you can see that the options to the left that we're promoting are all lower cost. Next slide, please. The good news is that so far 26 municipalities in Ontario have passed resolutions calling on the Government of Ontario to phase out our gas plants. Next slide, please. I'm also pleased to note that President Biden has committed the United States to move to a 100% carbon-free electricity grid by 2035. So Mayor Burton and members of council, I'm here today because we hope that the town of Oakville will pass a resolution requesting Ontario to phase out the gas-fired power plants to help Ontario and the town of Oakville achieve their climate targets. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I would be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons, for your time and your information. Are there questions, council? Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Vince Brescia from the Ontario Energy Association.
Welcome, Mr. Brescia. Council looks forward to your information.
Hello, can you hear me?
We hear you very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Oakville Council for allowing me to present today and speak to this matter. I'm from the Ontario Energy Association, and we view this issue through the lens of Canada's Net Zero 2050 commitment and the role of natural gas generation in that. Time is short, so if I could ask to go to the next slide, and I'll move through some slides pretty quickly. Just so you know who we are, we represent the breadth of Ontario's energy sector. We have the largest LDCs. We have power and capacity producers that include nuclear, wind, solar, storage, natural gas, power generation, demand response, et cetera, energy efficiency, microgrids. And we have natural gas distribution as well, and all the various service providers in the sector. Next slide, please. We view this issue through the lens of Net Zero 2050. We strongly support the objective. That's what underpins this motion, that motivation, and support that motivation of council. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that this resolution will actually support this objective. It's going to require a major transformation of the way Ontario uses energy. And our view is that detailed analysis is needed to underpin the transformation before we make any precipitous decisions about our energy system. We commissioned a study, which you can see on our website, which analyzed this issue in detail. I'd like to speak to that and about the transformation of our system, so I can explain why it is we're proposing that you not pass the motion as it's worded. Next slide, please. We retain Power Advisory LLP, which is a highly respected energy consulting firm that has former system planners from the Independent Electricity System Operator to analyze the implications of shutting down gas-fired generation. They think we need the gas generation past 2030, that it would cost at least $60 billion to phase out the gas plants, so there'd be affordability issues for Ontario customers. The proposed Hydro-Quebec solution, which you just heard about, they say is not feasible. New transmission lines would be required, so there's long lead times for that. The big thing is that Hydro-Quebec has never offered us firm supply, which is necessary to replace the gas plants. Not all electricity supply is the same, and I'll talk a bit about why natural gas plants provide a particular type of power, which underpins the reliability of our system. The other issue is that Hydro-Quebec has forecasted its own supply deficit. Again, this is what our consultants have reported back to us. The most important reason, though, is that gas generators may play a critical role in helping Ontario meet its greenhouse gas reduction targets. Next slide, please. I'm going to go quickly through some of these, just some background about how we use energy. The electricity system is only 16% of our energy supply. In Ontario, we tend to have a myopic focus on the electricity system. Most of our energy and emissions come from petroleum use, which is for our transportation system, and our natural gas system, which heats our buildings. So that is where we have to deal with our emissions. Next slide, please. This is where our emissions come from, and one of the councillors referred to it earlier in her question. The transportation system is really the bulk of where our emissions come from, and then buildings and industry, and together they count for well over 80% of our emissions. The electricity system is now down to 2%, thanks to the work we've done to remove coal-fired generation from the province. Next slide, please. This is the carbon intensity of our electricity system compared to other jurisdictions in North America. We have one of the lowest emitting jurisdictions in North America. Again, it's something to be proud of. Next slide, please. This is the carbon intensity of our electricity system compared to other international jurisdictions. Again, we have one of the lowest emitting electricity systems in the world. It really is something to be proud of in the efforts we took to decarbonize our system. Next slide, please. We achieved that decarbonation, as you've heard, by taking out the coal plants. How we took out the coal plants was by building natural gas plants. They replaced coal plants and provided this particular service, this reliability and backstopping service. And so you see this huge reduction we've achieved with the creation and building of the natural gas plants. However, during the same, at the same time, we haven't been paying attention to other sectors, and our transportation sector has largely undone most of the emissions reductions we've achieved by building the gas plants. When we built the gas plants, we also added 1-for-1 wind power, which was only enabled because we have the gas plants there to back us up when the wind isn't available. Next slide, please. This just demonstrates how our transportation system is really a source of a problem. Canada is basically the worst offender in the world in terms of the emissions intensity of our transportation sector. If you're a glass half full person, this is our opportunity. We can make the most progress by focusing on our transportation system, and council may have things that it can do within its jurisdiction in this area. Next slide, please. The natural gas generators provide almost a third of our capacity. You can see this capacity chart here on the left side, the bar, 26% of our capacity, but only 7% of our energy output. It's because we don't use them very often. Their role is to provide a backup service, and that's why the emissions are so low coming from the gas plants. Next slide, please. This is a demonstration of how we use the gas plants. During the polar vortex, they fired heavily. We had a heavy need for energy, and when our system has a critical peak need, like on hot summer days, the orange bars you see on the top there, that's our natural gas generation. Not on a mild day, like I took an example, this is from Independent Electricity System Operator data. On a mild day on April 3rd, they basically don't run, and that's what happens most of the times of the year. We call the plants to provide a critical reliability service. Next slide, please. So to circle this all back to net zero 2050, if you look at the reports that have been written around the world and here in Canada about achieving this goal of net zero by 2050, they all involve a massive expansion of our electricity system. We're going to have to start swapping out some of those other fuels I showed in an earlier pie chart about where we use energy and where emissions come from. You look at the International Energy Agency, they released a report last week, said we're going to have a massive expansion of the electricity system. They think up to 50% of our energy internationally is going to be needed. We're going to need other types of energy, hydrogen, there's other transformations, but this discussion today is about electricity, so I'm focusing on that system. I don't mean to think it's the only part of our energy solution. We are going to need other technological solutions. Princeton University looked at all the options available to the US, and they all involve a high level of electricity expansion, and they think the existing gas plants will play a pivotal role on providing, again, that firm capacity and flexibility that our gas plants provide here. I won't go through the other reports, but they all find the same thing. We need to massively expand our electricity system. The proposal to shut down the gas plants would take away a third of our capacity. This would be very counterproductive in all likelihood on our objective of meeting our net zero 2050 targets. We need to encourage people to have confidence in our electricity system, and we're going to need to expand it rather than contract it. And that's why we're making the suggestion that you not have this objective of 2030. That's a pretty early date. I think we need to do some analysis about the role natural gas-fired generation might play and in helping us expand our electricity system to absorb some of these other fuels in the other parts of our economy. I don't know if I had another slide or not. Yeah, no, I didn't. So I'll stop there, and I thank Council for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for your information. Councillor Lischina has a question, and Councillor Longo. Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Mr. Brescia or Brescia?
Brescia, thank you.
Brescia. I take offense when my name gets all clobbered, so I wanted to make sure I get yours correct. Mr. Brescia, a statement was made earlier, or a statistic about, I wrote it down, Ontario fire power plants are going to increase by 300% by 2030 and by 500% by 2040, that I believe Mr. Gibbons had said. I didn't see that in any of your report here. Could you make a comment about that, please?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's a very good question. It is true that the ISO has put forward this forecast, and I think that is something to be concerned about and something we can do something about. But I don't think making this precipitous decision, this hurried decision to shut down the gas plants is the right one for our climate objectives. We got to the lowest carbon intensity system, one of the lowest in the world, by building these gas plants. I think we can take actions and add more as solar and wind and things like that. Having the gas plants will help us add more of those renewables to the system. We don't need to necessarily increase our emissions. It's one thing to say, I'm concerned about this emissions increase, and if the council passed a resolution saying, we're concerned about this emission increase, province, we'd like you to look at that and take steps to avoid that. We're very supportive of that. That makes a lot of sense to me. However, to make a decision to shut down these gas plants, in other jurisdictions, they're starting to use hydrogen to retrofit these plants. If we mothball these plants, we haven't even taken advantage of the technological opportunities to use them. One of the gas plants we just completed last year. Like the last bolt was screwed down on the plant last year in a 20-year contract with the ISO. We're walking away from probably, I don't know, I'm going to guess that it's over $1 billion, maybe billions of dollars in costs for ratepayers. So, and carbon capture and utilization and storage might be an option for some of these gas plants. So I don't think shutting them down is the answer, but I think raising concerns about this increase, as has been done, I think that would be a useful motion by council. So that makes sense to me.
Thank you on that one. And just one more quick question. The triple import of hydroelectricity from Quebec, so the 3% to 9% based on our existing transmission line, has that been considered at this point, or is that number even correct?
Our consultants, it's in our report, looked at it, and currently the gas plants provide 11,300 megawatts of capacity. We could get up to 1,800 by upgrading our existing transmission system. So you can see we need to build a lot of transmission capacity, which would take quite a bit of time. And also Quebec has to offer us the kind of power necessary to replace gas plants, which they have never offered to us. It's one thing to say, we'll give you energy and sell it at a low price when you don't need it. We have excess power that we sell to them at the same time. That's not particularly special. Quebec needs to come forward. We need to stop hearing about, let's just do a deal and they have this cheap power. They need to put the money, put an offer forward to us that offers firm supply that could actually replace some gas plants before we start shutting them down. This is happening in the wrong order, right? We don't shut the gas plants down before we know we've lined up firm capacity to meet our reliability needs.
I know that was last question, but I have one more that just popped up. So in your report, you had mentioned obviously transportation is a huge source of greenhouse gases, and we're very proud in Oakville to be one of the places where electricity is going obviously green. And so that is a concern then regarding actually not having enough clean power to power our clean cars. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we need to move at least half of that. That pie chart I had with all that oil use representing basically half of our energy. We need to take at least half of that and put it on the electricity system, if not more. So we need a significant expansion of our electricity system for that. We need to take a lot of manufacturing activity and substitute electricity for some of the activity that's happening there. We're going to need a massive expansion of our electricity system to absorb all these emissions uses that you see in our earlier charts. I really think we need to think carefully about the role of these gas plants in the
future. Thank you very much.
As we do that.
Thank you, Councillor Lischina. I have three more hands showing. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Chisholm, and Councillor Longo. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Vince, for coming tonight. I'm wondering if the Power Advisory LLP's reports, did they ever include in the costing the cost associated with environmental repercussions and health impacts from fossil fuel burning? Were those factored into the numbers?
Off the top of my head, I don't think we looked specifically at that. We're functioning under the assumption we've achieved the low emissions level that we have in this to date and can maintain it, but we didn't look at specifically any health impacts related to the possibility that emissions might increase as forecasted by the ISO. Again, I think there's things we can do to mitigate that outcome, and we should avoid that.
No, I appreciate that. You did mention there's a $60 billion cost associated with this, though, and there are other costs associated with this as well that are outside of just the infrastructure and the hard capital costs. So I was wondering if the links you had up there mentioned any of the associated ancillary costs associated with burning carbon and fossil fuels in the province and right across Canada.
It's a fair question, Councillor, because we did have a significant health benefit from closing down the coal plants, and that was measured, and that requires a particular type of expertise. That was doctors and et cetera who did a study that provided the estimate of the savings there. That was beyond the scope of our study. But again, I think our target should be to avoid an emissions increase to keep the gains that we've made so that there doesn't have to be a health impact.
Okay, so the So you're saying our target should be to avoid an increase, but not to proceed with reductions? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, we've achieved this low level emissions with the gas plants, and they provide this critical backup capacity. I think it's important for us to be careful about just ripping out that backup capacity precipitously from our system.
And do you know off by hand, and again, it may predate you, so I completely absolve you if you don't know, but do you know what the OEC's position was around 2005 when the province wanted to move forward with winding down coal plants?
I wasn't part of the Ontario Energy Association then, so, but I see they're on the agenda later, so now you're too late for you to offer your vote on the motion, but I'm not sure what their position was. I'm sure they were support. I'm not going to say anything. I don't know. Sorry.
No problem. I'm just curious. And thank you very much, Your Worship. And thank you for your time. It's the information's always appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Chisholm, as the mover of the motion, would you like to go last of the question period, or do you want to go now? Councillor Longo, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Vince, for your presentation. Just so there have been a couple of presentations now that talk about this Hydro-Quebec, and who is actually responsible for those types of discussions? Is it the province itself to be able to secure supply from Hydro-Quebec, as well as upgrade the transmission lines? Because multiple people have talked about it, but who ultimately is accountable to try and get a deal in place with Hydro-Quebec and the province of Quebec?
A very good question, Councillor. That would either be the provincial government or the independent electricity system operator. We do have a competitive system in Ontario, and Hydro-Quebec is fully entitled to come forward. We have a capacity auction and could come forward with a proposal to provide more energy to us publicly and openly. And that's what we'd like to see most of all in the energy sector, is an open and transparent process. If they want to come forward and offer us, this tremendous opportunity that others say is there, we've never seen it. They've usually gone directly to the Premier's office. They try and avoid the public scrutiny. They're a smart company, Hydro-Quebec, so they go to the Premier's office and try to get a deal directly, to get someone who's not involved in managing the system to sign a deal with them. But, not all energy is the same, and it requires a detailed analysis before you'd make a decision like that. They did put forward a deal that was leaked in 2017, and it was what's called an energy deal, not a capacity deal, where they offered to sell us energy at a cheap price, but not this firm capacity, that we really want, because we had an abundance of energy at the time. It was not a very good offer to us. So all we'd ask for is that with this net zero 2050 objective, we need to be open to all options. And all we ask is that people come forward publicly and transparently. We need Hydro-Quebec to come forward and put a proposal forward if it's something that we want to pursue. And that's the first step. Not shutting down the gas plants. Step one, let's see this deal. Let's put it on the table. Let's see what it looks like. Let's analyze the implications for our ratepayers and on emissions and all those system reliability, those types of things. And then we can make an informed decision of whether this is the right decision for the province.
Okay, then just a follow-up question. Are there opportunities within Ontario for more renewable energy, such as hydro? Because I know Quebec and I actually had the pleasure of growing up in Quebec and in Montreal, so I'm very familiar with Hydro-Quebec, the Churchill Falls deal and all that kind of stuff when it came to securing very low cost for Hydro-Quebec with Newfoundland Labrador. But are there opportunities within Ontario to develop a hydro renewable energy source, or nuclear as another option that has low GHG emissions? So are those also? So I could see it as being engaged with Quebec and Hydro-Quebec, but then at the same time, is there something that can be done to try and have less reliance on fossil fuels and look at more renewable?
Absolutely, Councillor. There are multiple options available to us. Our association has all those parts of the electricity system who are keen to help us expand that system. We could do more nuclear. There's more wind and solar we can add. Wind tends to be a little better for Ontario's circumstances. We need more energy storage. Demand response is something else which is growing quite significantly. And instead of adding new capacity, demand response reduces the demand at peak times to take better advantage of our system. So there's our members have energy storage proposals to go forward to optimize the use of the excess energy that we have currently in our system. There are many, many green options available. Energy efficiency is something that you heard earlier about it. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't do much to help you replace a gas plant because it doesn't reduce your peak that much, but we're going to need a lot of it to reduce the emissions in buildings going forward. So there's a lot of this activity we're going to need in the future to meet our objectives.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Councillor O'Meara, are you anxious to go for a second time, or did you just leave your electronic signal up?
Sorry, Your Worship. At the region, it comes off automatically, and I keep forgetting to take mine off on my own. Sorry about that.
I think actually, okay, no problem. Councillor Chisholm, before you go, I have a question, and if you permit me to go before you, that way you still get the last word. Mr. Brescia, I'm concerned or interested in this dichotomy here. I hear you, I haven't heard you say that you're not anxious to increase gas plant capacity by 300 to 500%. And I have heard you imply, I think, that nevertheless you would not increase emissions. So could you clear that up? How do you, how or why do you increase capacity and not increase emissions?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a very good question. We got to the low level of emissions we have, the data we're showing, we got to 97% emissions free in our electricity system by building the gas plants. What I'm proposing is that we can take activities like Councillor Longo mentioned to avoid an increased use of the gas plants, to keep them there for backup. But we can add more wind to the system. We can add new technologies. We can add more demand response to avoid the need to increase any emissions from the gas plants. The ISO made a forecast just that they would start ramping up use of the gas plants more once Pickering comes down. As Councillor Longo alluded to, there are other options available to us to avoid that outcome. I'd rather see us pursue that and maintain this backup capacity based on the research our consultants has done.
So are you suggesting that you're not going to increase capacity?
No, to meet next year, 2050, we're going to have a massive expansion of our electricity system. So we'll be consistently adding capacity to our system. It would be nice to have the backup capability of the gas plants there, but we can be adding non-emitting resources with the help of those gas plants, because when you have that backup, you can provide that reliable electricity that customers will want before they switch from their current fuel use.
So are you suggesting that as you enlarge the system becomes the larger denominator, and if we also increased gas plant capacity but only used it for backup, the percent of the percent of the system's emissions would stay the same, but surely the quantum of emissions would go up? Like if the system's larger,
it doesn't have to. What I'm saying is
3% of a larger system is a lot more than 3% of a smaller system, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying the capacity of the gas plants is already there. So it's 11,300 megawatts. I'm just saying that very often if we plan properly, and we should make plans to have alternative resources so we don't need to increase the use of them. So the ISO is not proposing to increase the number of gas plants. They're just proposing to use them more than they are currently. We're suggesting there are better alternatives to that. We don't need to shut them down because they provide this critical reliability service.
Okay, so the IESO, if I'm understanding you correctly, doesn't have a plan to triple or quadruple the amount of generating supply from gas?
No, they are. They don't have a plan. They've forecasted that they're going to use the gas plants more. A useful campaign would be to ask them to look at alternatives to avoid that increase. But it's a whole other thing to say we need to shut down the gas plants entirely, as opposed to avoid using them more.
So that's why you're suggesting that we should be telling them not to build more rather than to get rid of what they've got.
Yes, yeah, they don't. I'm not sure they plan to build more, but if your motion would be very productive if it asked the ISO to examine options to avoid any increased emissions from natural gas-fired generation.
Well, I believe the councilors behind the motion have a different way to come at the same result. So thank you very much. It's Councillor Chisholm's turn, and he has the floor, and we're all looking forward to his questions and your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your report. And to me, what I'm hearing, and we can talk further about it on the questions. Do you believe with the gas-fired plants, if you're saying shutting them down? I don't think we're saying shutting down. I think it's the phase out of the gas plants on the greenhouse emissions over time. Is it the discussion or your agreement or disagreement that the phase out of gas plants with alternate sources of whatever, be wind or other options available, is that something that you would agree that would be the possibility of moving in that direction?
I'm sorry, but no, Councillor. Phase out and shut down are the same to me. So if you phase out a gas plant, you're shutting it down. If you're going to set 2030 as a hard date and say we're phasing them out, you're mothballing them. You're stopping to use them. They'll get torn down or redeveloped, and they won't be available for other technological options which we may want to use them, like injecting renewable natural gas into them, or which is an option, or using hydrogen, converting them to hydrogen plants, or carbon capture and storage, or just having them there for a backup as we massively expand our electricity system, and that confidence that we have in having a full backup system. If you phase them out, they're gone because the operator no longer has a revenue source, so they'll be mothballed. Maybe it's semantic, but that's how I view it.
And with the gas-fired plants that we have now, there's over 23 municipalities have approved this type of resolution with respect to this resolution we're putting forward this evening. So there seems to be some general agreement across Ontario with respect to phasing out gas-fired plants because of the greenhouse gas emissions and so forth. But what I'm asking you, you're saying let's mothball them, but do you really believe they'd be mothballed or they would continue to be used?
Well, if you phase them out, they will be mothballed. By the way, not all councils had the same resolution. If you look at Toronto Council's resolution, it was a little more circumspect. It wasn't this 2030 hard stop to phase them out. So you might want to have a look at their resolution. That's part of my concern. It's making, these. I understand the motivation that's underpinning the councils. The motivation is a good one. And if it was, let's take steps to avoid, the ISO's proposed increase in emissions, because there are clean alternatives to that outcome. We'd be supportive and analyze that. But my concern is with the hard stop in 2030.
Have you had discussions, because we heard the presentations from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance, have there been discussions between your organization and Ontario Clean Air Alliance to come up with some kind of agreements or direction or for strategies in the future?
They have not approached us with discussions on alternatives and strategies. No.
To me, I guess it would make some sense, because I think you're basically, if you look at what the discussions and the suggestions are, I think you're both going in the right direction, but it's just a difference of opinion of what should be replaced or what should be done and so forth. I think there's opportunity for open discussion with Ontario Clean Air Alliance and yourselves to come up with something that the Ontario residents would be comfortable with in the future. So I see your report and so forth, and your letter. It seems to be defending, but not really giving us any plan of what you would like to see done. It's more saying, well, all these things can happen, and we're not sure it's going to happen this way. I'm just saying, let's put a plan together and have those bodies of interest involved in this, and let's move forward on it, because we can have one proactive, and there's some very proactive comments made by Ontario Clean Air Alliance. Put a moratorium on rebuilding aging nuclear plants. There's something right there. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think those discussions need to be had in order to come up with some clean strategy in the future for hydroelectric in our province. Wouldn't you agree?
I couldn't agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more, Councillor. What we want is planning. It's the reason we hired system planners at Power Advisory. We hired experts. We want this to be underpinned by experts, not advocacy, and engineers, not advocates. Developing a plan is exactly what we are calling for. We need a full and robust plan about the implications for Ontario citizens. We support that. We'll be releasing a net zero paper next week calling for provincial and federal coordination and planning, and municipal and provincial coordination in reaching this objective. And it definitely needs to be underpinned by planning, because we are talking about a pretty significant transformation of our economy. So I couldn't agree with you more. We need planning and detailed planning to underpin these decisions.
Thank
so
you.
You can understand why this resolution is coming forward, or excuse me, the notice of motion coming forward to council. We want to see a plan. We want to see something move forward. We want to reduce greenhouse gases. The 3% is 3%. If it's down to zero, it's zero. I mean, the mayor was quite right. 3% is small. A small 3% is going to be a larger 3% in the future, because we're stepping up on our output of electricity. So let's get this together and have some clear, concise direction in the future. That's why this resolution has come forward.
Okay, so excuse me, Mr. Brescia, and thank you, Councillor Chisholm. There was this beautiful moment where you actually said that you agree with each other, and I just want to read you what Councillor Chisholm's motion actually says, because it's not quite as you have been fearing or perceiving, Mr. Brescia. What Councillor Chisholm asks in clause 1 of his motion, his resolution, is to develop and implement a plan to phase out all gas-fired electricity generation by 2030, not to phase out the plants. So, earlier you talked about it may be a semantical question, and yes, I think it is a semantical question. Leaving, the clear wording here is we want to get rid of gas-fired generation. If you want to shift the plants, if they want to shift the plants to hydrogen fire or any other alternative, all good and all contemplated by Councillor Chisholm's motion. So I hope that gives you some comfort.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. It's a prescriptive. A phase out is a prescriptive shutdown of the plants by 2030. The hydrogen solution won't be ready by then, so the plants would in effect be mothballed because they would no longer have a use. So I appreciate your attempt to see a meeting of the minds there, but I guess what I'm focused on is the hard stop of 2030 is so soon, and if the use of the word phase out is really an attempt to shut them down. They're one and the same from my perspective. I would, if you had a wording that Councillor Chisholm was talking about, we want a plan and we want to see emissions not increase, that would make a lot of sense to me. But this is a very prescriptive motion in part 1.
Well, I offered you my interpretation. I'm sorry you didn't like it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
But, I have 2 more questioners for you, assuming that Councillor Chisholm may be done. Councillor Haslett-Thiel and then Councillor Robertson.
Thank you very much for all of the information. I'm just wondering if my council colleagues would have an interest in changing the word from a plan to phase out to reduce significant dependence on as an alternative, which still speaks to the need for a plan. It speaks to the need to reduce significant dependence on all gas-fired electricity, and it moves, because I am struck by the critical nature of reliability, and I think the emphasis needs to be on a concrete plan that does that versus phasing out. So I put that to my council colleagues as to see if they have any interest in that as an adjustment.
Well, Councillor, the movers are bringing, did you get the extra clause number 4? There's a memo?
I did not. Mayor Burton, my system went down and I have what I have, so I don't have the extra
Madam
clause.
Clerk.
If you'd like to read it.
I would, yes. That may help everybody, if I can find
I
it.
have it, Mayor, in front of me if you want me to.
Would you do it, Councillor Chisholm?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 4, to ensure a fair, balanced, and responsible climate resilient approach in reducing our emissions intensity while providing energy from a provincial system that is reliable, resilient, and affordable.
So that seeks to do the same thing and avoids the trap of calling 3% significant, which I think leads to, new semantical discussions.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Councillor Robertson?
Hi, I guess in terms of what Councillor Haslett-Field just proposed, but looking at your actual name of, net zero 2050, my biggest concern is that we're in a climate crisis now, and we're not looking for the abilities right now that are in place or doable that could help with this. So sitting there saying, almost 30 years from now, we hope to be net zero and we need to be net zero more quickly is tough to take. So by putting in a strict year of a phase out plan, that actually, forces everyone to do something. Your company, your like the province, everyone has to do that. So I guess when you say, you look at hydrogen and other areas, what do you foresee being that timeline?
Is that for me, Councillor?
Yes, Mr. Brescia,
Yes,
she
it
wants
is.
to
Sorry.
know
Yes.
how far in the future is the magic of hydrogen power?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thanks. I guess what I'd say about net zero 2050, I just use it because it's what we're all talking about now and what we've signed on to as a nation. Don't take that to mean we shouldn't take action as quickly as possible to start greening our system. And there are lots and lots of opportunities for us to green the system. And members of our association are working on that on a daily basis. I'm not saying let's take our time to net zero. It's a massive undertaking. To get to net zero 2050 is going to require a massive transformation of our economy. Huge. It's going to be the largest infrastructure project this country has ever undertaken. There are lots of low-hanging fruit available to us now, like in our transportation system. We have all the technology we need right now to completely decarbonize that system. We should get on it right away, and it's the largest source of our emissions. And we need a healthy, robust electricity system in order to do that. And that's why we're using the 2050 name, because we have this big target to achieve. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be lots of opportunity, but it's also going to be very difficult for us, and we should get going right away because of how difficult it is.
Okay, I think that motion is what we need to do in terms of getting there, in terms of forcing everybody to the table quicker. But thank you for your presentation. It's good to hear it from your perspective.
Thank you.
Councillor Lischina?
Thank you. I'm going to get rid of my hand. Well, I agree with the wording of Councillor Haslett-Field that she's proposed to the makers of the motion, because I'm confused about point 4. I don't see it in my e-scribe either, but it doesn't actually, that whole phase out issue with the hard stop is really what I don't see how the two things square up. But I do like the wording that Councillor Haslett-Field put forward, which of course is has to come to the makers of the motion.
Okay, well, if you want to change the wording, do the mover and seconder want to change their wording, number one, and if they don't, then amendments are the procedure by which that's attempted. Why don't we go to the mover for the first answer, and then Councillor O'Meara has 2 hands up, so he's next.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm just confused of where we are. Are we still hearing from delegations, or are we discussing the motion as it's been tabled now? Because it seems like we're on 2 sort of strides at the same time here.
Well, there's, if we're talking about changing the motion, we're probably done hearing the delegation. And,
okay.
And if there are no other, but I have a new hand, and so I don't know what this hand intends. So let me ask Councillor Adams if he has a question or he wishes to join the debate. If we're debating, we're thanking the delegation.
I wanted to join the debate by asking if our clerk could email council the point 4 that you read out, because I kind of heard it, but not fully.
Actually, it was emailed to you. I was informed, but we'll send it again.
Thank you.
I think. Technology, it's wonderful. All right. I'm going to thank Mr. Bruscia for his time and his information and his good-natured patience with answering all our questions. And we'll now confine the matter to table. And to assist the clerks and others in distributing this missing item number 4, I'm going to call a brief recess. Why don't you take 10 minutes, and we'll see you at just after 9:15. All right, it's 9:16. I'll call us back to order. But having called us back to order, maybe we'll wait a second or two for others to log in. Here we go. We're substantially complete now. When we were last together, we were hearing, I think we kind of, I don't know how to describe it, so I'm just going to say, Councillor Adams, would you like the floor? Seems to me you were close to having it or near it before we recessed. And I didn't say that just because I see you chewing something.
Yeah, you obviously want to get me chewing toffee. Because, sugar time. It's been a long time. You need more sugar. The only thing I had to add is a possible amendment to replace the 1, 2, 3, 4 with something simpler for council consideration. That would be one, that council express its concern over the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the Ontario electricity system from the use of gas-fired power plants to the Ontario government. And 2, request the government of Ontario to explore options to obtain clean energy from Quebec through the use of made in Ontario wind and solar power.
So now, Councillor Chisholm, do you want to press the wrong button? Hopefully this works better now. Councillor Chisholm, it's really to you. Do you want to entertain changes to your resolution, or would you like to stand pat?
We could be making a lot of changes in this, in the wordsmithing. I'm going to stand pat with the notice motion here. I think if we start playing with this, we're going to get into more, we're going to be bogged down on semantics.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm just going to sort of echo the obvious here, which I think needs to be done sometimes. I mean, we're not making policy for the provincial government here. We're not making policy for the IESO. What we're asking is the province of Ontario to recognize the fact that we've declared a climate emergency, not a climate issue, not a climate, we need to deal with this at some point. You know, as Norman Peale once said, if you aim for the moon, at least if you miss, you're among the stars. So let's try and get, you know, get this government to think that there are other ways. I mean, urgency is the essence of innovation. And I'm sure these exact same comments we've heard tonight were echoed in 2004, 2005, before they started phasing out the coal plants. I'm positive of it. In fact, I'm probably betting the future of my kid's life on it. So let's get innovation going. Let's step forward. Let's be bold. Let's ask. You know, there's no harm. And we're among friends in municipalities who have all done this. I think there's over 16 now who have all asked similar. Yes, there's been some, you know, in a variety of ways. But I'm, you know, I don't think we need to parse, you know, over how forceful we're being on a recommendation here. You know, I mean, we're asking them to do something that I think is the right thing to do. And, you know, I don't blame, why would Quebec come to the table when we haven't even said we're going to get off of this in the first place? I mean, you know, until we make that step and we start getting serious about getting rid of burning fossil fuels for our energy, I mean, you know, we're just sort of spinning in circles. So I'm with Councillor Chisholm on this, and you know, again, I don't think we're not setting policy here or moving mountains. We're just asking the province to recognize something that I think so far they're refusing to recognize. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. I will be supporting your motion as it is. I believe that the extra clause that you provided about affordability, resilience, and reliability goes a long way to assuage concerns about, you know, making mistakes. And I also believe that the nice gentleman from OEA was kind of trying to have it both ways when he was saying, you know, don't phase out the plants so that we can turn them into hydrogen burning plants. And then on the other hand, he was saying, when I read the resolution to him, that we're not saying close the plants, we're saying stop gas-fired generation. He said, well, then they'll be closed and mothballed and we won't be able to turn them into hydrogen. So, you know, it was kind of an interesting little piece of footwork for me. So I'm gonna stick with you guys and your motion as it is. Are there other speakers, or shall I call the vote? All right, Councillor Hazat-Thiel.
So I will support it now that I have clause 4 and other people have clause 4. Well, I might have wanted to wordsmith it a bit. I support the spirit and intent, and Councillor O'Meara has persuaded me that by being bold, perhaps somebody will listen. So I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hazat-Thiel. All right. All those, well, I'll do my usual thing. Is there any objection to the motion? There's, I see one.
Your Worship, can we have a recorded vote, please?
All right. In the name of efficiency, because the hour is late and there's a big agenda still in front of us, I'll ask the clerk to record the vote as all those present in favor and Councillor Lischina against. Does that capture it for everyone? Any corrections to that? Thank you, everybody. So that allows us to move on now to item 9.5, Advancing Community Infrastructure Implementation Plan. And the commissioners, Bell and Sully, are available for your questions. Or in the alternative, I'm always open for a motion. And we don't need a seconder because we're in committee of the whole. Councillor Knoll.
Giving you a motion.
Thank you. When you unmuted, I found your sound to be quite faint, so there may be a technical issue going on there too. But anyway, it's moved by Councillor Knoll. Is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, it is carried. The next item is 9.6, Now, this is a naughty little problem, the apple scab on municipal crabapple trees. We have a staff presentation by Jalil Hashimi, the Manager of Forestry Services, and Chris Mark, the Director of Parks and Open Space. And the item is for receipt. Madam Clerk, would you tee up the staff for this presentation? Live and in person, we get Chris Mark. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. Excuse me, we don't have a presentation this evening, but I am available to answer any questions of council.
Well, as Humphrey Bogart said in Casablanca, I was misinformed. Councillor Chisholm has questions.
Your Worship, no questions. I'd be happy to move it.
All right, thank you. Councillor Lischina and Councillor Longo may have questions. Councillor Lischina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Chris, could you make a comment about, so on page 4 of 9, where the second paragraph, it states, talking about if we go with the crabapple example, then it basically, regardless of species, every species can be requested to be removed. Could we not, is this report not only, I guess I'm trying to make myself clear. Could this be not specific to crabapple, or does this open up to every species? Because that's a concern.
Through you, Mayor Burton, certainly council can restrict this to crabapple trees, but we felt it important to advise council that we do get a number of calls and concerns about other species of trees besides crabapple, because of the nuisance issues associated with those trees. So you certainly can contain it to crabapple, but we certainly do get calls about, aphids on lindens that create sap on people's cars. We get acorns from oak trees that are falling on people's cars. We get a number of calls from people about town trees, really related to aesthetics, if you want to call it. So I just felt it important that get pointed out for council as well.
I have a gigantic town maple tree that overhangs my driveway. And so every year I get treated to just a rain of sap on any car I leave under it. And I don't think we're about to get rid of maple trees. So yeah, I take your point. Councillor Longo?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just, Chris, just a quick question. Is there an opportunity to look at a phase out or I guess a removal of trees that have been tried to be treated with apple scab but are unsuccessful? And I'm very cognizant of the tree canopy and the importance of that, but is there an opportunity to do kind of a more surgical removal and then replanting to offset the canopy that would be taken down with those trees that are infected?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the Bureau on treatment that we started last year, we really don't have any results to date on that. We're hoping it will be effective, but we really don't have any hard data or evidence to advise council how effective or not effective it is. I would suggest that if council is interested in a phased approach to removal of the more nuisance crabapple trees, that we would prepare something for a budget committee, and possibly that could come as a budget request to council. We do remove crabapple trees when they do become dead. We remove approximately about 25 per year, and they're not being replaced along the road allowance when we do take them away. But that may be one approach, is to bring forward a budget item for council to consider.
And so that would, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
No, just so that would be at the town's expense versus the homeowner's expense, where we do the removal, and that's why you'd be putting forward the budget, correct?
Yes, I believe that's what you were leading towards, Councillor Longo.
Yeah, correct. Okay, thank you.
So Councillor O'Meara also has his hand up. Councillor O'Meara?
Sorry, Mr. Morgan, maybe just so I can help understand a little better. So right now, the director yourself does not have the authority to approve if something's been infected and dying, you can't make that decision then. Is that what I'm getting from this?
Our policy states, our council approved policy states that we only remove dead, diseased or hazardous trees within the town's road allowance.
Okay, so for instance, if there's a tree that's causing damage to somebody's private property, for instance, that you would not be able to remove that tree?
Certainly, there is some latitude there, but the issue with the crabapples, through you, Mayor Burton, is that these trees are all not dead. They do lose their leaves early because of apple scab, but you go and look at a lot of these trees that are concerned about right now, and they'll be in full leaf. Go back a month or 2 months later, they'll probably maybe have 30 or 40% less leaves. Maybe by the fall, they'll have early leaf drop about the end of August. So removing them right now doesn't fit with our criteria because these trees are living and they are alive.
So then my last question would, knowing what we know now about crabapple trees, would you ever plant them on town property again?
Through you, Mayor Burton, no, we have discontinued the planting of crabapple trees on town property.
Okay, that makes the decision a little easier. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Council. Oh, Councillor Elger.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton, to Mr. Mark. Chris, what if the crabapple trees are on private property and they die? We do not pay for that either, correct?
That is correct, Councillor Elger.
Are there many crabapple trees that were planted but are not on the town property? Are we aware of the numbers that could be?
I really can't comment on that, Councillor Elgar, no. We'd have to take each one at its own location.
Okay, the streets that you're aware of, are they all on town property?
I believe they are all on town property, yes.
Okay, I thank you. So we would have to put in a budget, see if we could put in the budget ballpark so the council's aware how much to remove the tree and the stump would it cost per tree?
It's about $730, on average about $730. And if council wanted to remove all the 64 trees that are giving residents concerns right now, to remove all those trees and replace all those trees with a native tree would be about $76,000.
I thank you for that, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Mr. Mark, I know of a couple of folks who, in order to put in a semicircular driveway, needed permission from the town to remove a town tree from the boulevard. And at the homeowner's expense, a new tree was planted in the boulevard beside the new driveway. And I'm just wondering if that's an example where we could accommodate these 64, the owners of, or the residents who live near these 64 trees. If they wanted to replace the tree, would we allow them to do it?
Certainly we could work with residents on that, Council, Mayor Burton, absolutely, yes.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got two more hands. I think, Councillor O'Meara, yours is up, but I think that's because of the service. Councillor Lischina and then Councillor Giddings.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So, Chris, just to confirm, option 4 does allow for other trees beside any tree that's undesirable to be cut down. Is that what you're telling me?
Through your worship, no, it is specifically related to crabapple trees specifically.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Great.
Councillor Giddings. Councillor Giddings. Oh, they're saying they can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? For clarification, the motion that is on the floor, is it option 4, the recommended option from staff?
The motion on the floor by Councillor Chisholm is to receive the report. If you want an
Very
option,
good.
you need to move.
Yeah,
the option.
I would rather provide direction and through option 4, but we'll see how the vote goes.
All right. Councillor Chisholm, are you standing pat on your motion to receive?
tell you what, Your Worship, there is an option for direction of staff. And we're always talking about moving forward and being proactive and moving ahead. I'm fine with that, with Councillor Giddings' recommendation to the direction for option 4. So I'll take away from receiving the report.
Councillor Giddings, you're a man of influence tonight. Shall I put the vote? The motion by Councillor Chisholm is to approve option 4. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, I see no objection. The motion carries. Thank you, everybody. We now come to 9.7, the Council Strategic Plan Refresh. And it's 9:30. Siraj Mann, the Manager of Corporate Strategy, and Dorothy St. George, the Director of Economic Development and Corporate Strategy, are here with a presentation. It is a much considered item, and it may be that, anyway, it's up to you if you want the presentation. All right, I'll take that for you may not want the presentation. Councillor Adams?
I would like to see the presentation. I understand there's been some changes to it, so I think it'd be useful to see.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you tee up the presentation and the staff? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, and to members of council as well. We're here today to provide council with the final version of the annual progress report on the town's major initiatives for this term of council as part of the broader final report on the council strategic plan refresh. This report builds on the draft version of the refresh and the progress report that council received at the last council meeting on April 26th. Again, thank you to Your Worship and each member of council for your input over the past few months and for reviewing the draft materials with stakeholders and residents during the review period. Next slide, please. Tonight will be a shorter presentation to ensure members of council have an opportunity to ask questions from town staff, and because members of council are familiar with the majority of the contents of the report by now. Our focus tonight will be on highlighting the new additions to the progress report, the updated priority areas for the refresh, and some capital projects for consideration in the 10-year capital plan. Next slide, please. A brief background of where we are in the process for the refresh. Council received the draft refresh at the council meeting on April 26th. That draft was based on consultations with members of council who confirmed that the goals of the 2019 to 2022 council strategic plan remain valid for the remainder of this term of council. Those goals are livability, engaged community, accountable government, environment, and mobility. There was a 2-week review period following the April council meeting where members of council had the opportunity to provide additional comments and input on the refresh, as well as further staff input. Staff also consulted with the Oakville Chamber of Commerce to seek the Chamber's feedback on the draft refresh. The Chamber validated the components and priority areas of the draft refresh while highlighting the importance of a digital lens on all town initiatives. In addition, Your Worship also reviewed the draft refresh with members of the Community Leaders Roundtable for feedback and input. Next slide, please. Moving on to the updates, we draw attention to the progress report in Appendix A that highlights the major initiatives that were completed in 2019 and 2020, as well as the major initiatives that are underway or to be completed in 2021 and 2022. For 2021 and 2022, we want to draw particular attention to Section B of the staff report, which lists additional initiatives that were not mentioned in the draft progress report, but that are part of the final progress report. This evening, I believe a memo to council was also circulated with a couple of additional initiatives. We won't mention all of them, but some of the newly added initiatives for the remaining term of council include the following: the design and initiation of the construction of facilities and amenities on the North Park site, the acquisition of the former Trafalgar Reservoir for a new public park, additional pickleball courts, either via expansion or conversion, increased litter pickup and maintenance in parks and on trails, the issuing of an RFP for a waterfront restaurant on the existing tow wharf site, an increased number of automated speed enforcement cameras, and the consolidation of frequently used bylaws. For the refresh, looking at the priority areas that members of council identified to address during this term of council, we note that there is an additional item being given further prominence on top of the 5 priority areas that were previously mentioned in the draft refresh. This item in bold is, I think we might be one slide ahead. If we could go one slide back, please. This item in bold is the Halton Region Official Plan and Livable Oakville reviews. This is about coordinating between these 2 reviews to ensure that Oakville's vision for the future is reflected in both plans. The key components of the vision include supporting the town's approved urban structure that directs growth to a series of well-planned, transit-supported centers and nodes, moving forward with climate action, the preservation of prime agricultural land, protecting existing stable neighborhoods, and protecting the town's natural areas. The other priority areas that are carrying over, now numbered 2 through 6, are the same as mentioned in the draft refresh at the last council meeting. So we won't go through these in significant detail tonight. But for quick reference, the second priority area is to develop a pandemic recovery plan to manage the recovery period, including elements for financial sustainability, business supports, program and service delivery adaptation, enforcement, and workforce planning. The third priority area that members of council identified is continuing to promote safe and efficient travel on town roads. The fourth priority area is related to continuing to reduce the response time for processing applications, permits, and licenses, and improving communications with applicants. And as part of implementing the digital Oakville strategy, also placing an emphasis on offering services online. The fifth priority area is to enhance communications about the town's programs and services. And lastly, capital projects. Members of council identified various capital projects for this term of council, including those related to increased use of outdoor parks and recreation facilities. Now, as the planning for the 10-year capital plan during the 2022 budget process gets underway, staff will undertake additional consultations on this front. Next slide, please. For now, we have outlined in Appendix B a few capital projects for consideration based on input from members of council, including North Park recreation facilities and sports fields, the Downtown Cultural Hub and Downtown Development Plan, the 16-mile trail feasibility study, the relocation of Tow Wharf to Bronte, and the implementation of a waterfront restaurant at the existing Tow Wharf site, and an event strategy update that would include multicultural events. Next slide, please. Having shared the updates to the refresh and the progress report, as well as the capital items for consideration, and after the rounds of consultations with members of council, as well as the meetings with the chamber and the community leaders roundtable, we're happy to address any further questions or hear any comments as we bring forward the 2 recommendations: that the refresh be approved and that the capital projects identified in Appendix B be forwarded to the Budget Committee for consideration in the 10-year capital plan as part of the 2022 budget process. Thank you again, and we're pleased to hear any feedback or questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mann. I will look for hands signifying feedback and questions. I have Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Knoll, and Councillor Adams.
I just lowered my hand. I'm learning now. Sorry, Your Worship.
Well done.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the update. My specific concern relates to under the livability tab. I believe it's page 2, 2020 major initiatives under the implement section. It says to negotiate the ownership of the Bronte Outer Harbor. I guess where I'm coming from on this is it's been 4 or 5 years since the region transferred that over to the town, and the town has known that it needs to start to get that under ownership in order to to convert that into a restaurant. We've gone so far as to hire a consultant to look at what it's going to be and to look at the restaurants. And the residents and frankly myself are just having a real hard time wondering why we have to wait 6 years to begin to negotiate the ownership of the Harbor Banquet Center. All that on top of, and I'm completely for this, but now we're going to put out an RFP to make another building a restaurant down there when we haven't even dealt with the first one that we've proceeded along and we've sailed ship on. Now, I know that there are complications, and doing anything with government can take a long time, but I think to wait 4 or 5 or 6 years to just negotiate a land deal is difficult. And I'm wondering then, if we cannot put some stronger or different or more urgent language then in 2022, negotiate the ownership. I mean, finalize the ownership, seek finalization. I'm wondering if there's something a little more that we can tell the people of Brawny who've been staring at that building with the paint peeling off and the potholes in the concrete holes, that there is light here, and we're going to get that under ownership and move forward with the plans that we brought together 3 or 4 years ago. I'm wondering if we might be able to do that, because words are important, and I want to make sure that we've got the forcefulness behind the language that's in our strategic plan.
Through the chair, thank you to the member of council for the question. From our understanding, we believe the federal and provincial governments are negotiating on this, but we can certainly take that away as feedback for staff to have further discussions to highlight the urgency of this. In case Madam CAO or Director St. George have any additional comments, I would refer to them. But as is, the progress report in Appendix A does word it as negotiate ownership of Bronte Outer Harbor. And we do have it under the implement section for 2022, which staff did believe was appropriately worded, but we can take that back and have those further discussions to see if anything else can be done and if we can take a stronger look at that.
Can I ask the councillor and you, Mr. Mann, if there would be any harm or benefit from adding the word urgently to the verb negotiate? So Mr. Mann doesn't seem to think there'd be any problem with that. Would it help your perception of it and your messaging to your constituents, Councillor O'Meara, if we added urgently?
Yeah, I think that would help. I think gets us somewhere. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right. I'm happy to have been able to be of any assistance. Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Knoll, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Worship. How's my audio now? I think I fixed it.
It's
okay?
very strong audio now.
That's good. I'm very strong. Okay, a couple quick points. First of all, on the consolidation of frequently used bylaws, I'm curious why it's the consolidation of frequently used bylaws as opposed to the consolidation of all of our bylaws. I mean, it may not be the most earth-shattering issue that comes before this council, but I do know that I hear constant frustration with people that want to be able to understand the bylaws that they're governed by, and they often can't find them online. And I was told the reason that they cannot generally be found online is because they're not consolidated. So if we're simply taking a compendium of the most frequently used bylaws, we're going to still have people that, need to see the more obscure bylaws and still not going to have access to them. So I'm curious why we qualify it as frequently used bylaws and why the additional wording and put online and added to our website is not included in that plan.
Well, Mr. Mann, before you help him, I think the CAO wants to help. Madam
Thanks.
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say that given the time frame of really the 18 months, we felt it was doable to look at the most frequently referred to bylaws. So we are tracking right now which bylaws are accessed the most often and working from the top all the way down within the time frame that we have and moving as many of them as we can into a consolidated form so people can access them. So if you wanted to have the wording a little bit more broader than that, we could certainly do that. But given the 18-month time frame in terms of the end of the strategic plan, we felt the frequently asked ones was the priority ones we were starting with.
Well, Madam CEO,
Sure.
on behalf of the council, because it's not just Councillor Knoll who cares about this, what would be wrong with council changing the wording to wanting all of the bylaws consolidated and put online for easy reference by the public, with a priority on getting the most frequently used ones up as soon as possible?
That would certainly reflect the intent we had.
Oh, Councillor Knoll, would that?
You essentially took the words out of my mouth, so thank you
All
for
right.
that. That would work very well.
Thank you.
My second point is with respect to also under the accountable government section, I see that in 22, the emergency management plan review is listed as one of the goals. I'm just, is this where you're going to address the learnings from the COVID pandemic? And if so, why wouldn't that be specifically called out? Because I don't think, in my 20 years of council and, everybody else's 10 years on council, there's been a more important issue that we've ever had to deal with. So I'm curious why that's not given more prominence and why it's not specified as to a process of actually reviewing what we did and how we can do better going forward.
The risk of specifying COVID is that and I believe that as worded, COVID would be covered. At the risk of specifying COVID is the risk that you might focus exclusively or too much on it and not be open to other areas where it could be improved. But there's nothing wrong with adding with a special, especially with lessons to be learned from the pandemic, for example.
So that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm specifically referring to a reference to the lessons learned from the pandemic, because not only has it been the most significant issue since World War II, it's also been one of our greatest learning opportunities for addressing these issues. So I think that wording along the lines of what you're suggesting was exactly what I was intending. I didn't want to focus strictly on COVID, but use that as a starting point to actually examine our emergency plan.
I think by consent of council, it shall be done.
Okay.
It shall be
Third
so
thing, and this is
worded
probably
in
a
the
question
final
to you.
result.
I see in the memo that you have, Your Worship, you've indicated, or it has been indicated you've asked for the addition of the work plan around the courthouse be added to the strategic plan. I'm just curious what led to that and why we're using the terminology that you're using as opposed to lobbying for. I'm just concerned that we may be setting ourselves up for an X beside that particular goal if we're not able to achieve it. Do you know something we don't know? I guess is the question I'm asking.
I know that if we want it, we're going to have to accept the challenge of working for it, and we know how vitally important it is, and so I'm not afraid of a big challenge. I'm not a person who says, well, we might not make it, so we don't want to try. If that's the guy you want, I'm not the guy.
Well, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just curious if in fact there was some sort of catalyst to make you or to create this particular clause. Is there something that that's coming down the pipe? Is there some opportunity to have this conversation? Because from what I've heard, based on the capital expenditures that are taking place in Milton, they don't seem to have much interest in pursuing this any further.
I believe that this is worth, I'm not at liberty to say what you're asking me to say, but I will say that I believe it would be a good thing to put into your plan.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Adams and then Councillor Chisholm, I think. Or anyway, Councillor Adams for sure.
Thank you very much. I just had a few things to say about the plan. First of all, I wanted to thank our staff for the efficient way in which they went through the strategic plan refresh process with all of us. I think it was a convenient way to go through it. We all had a number of meetings with the staff to do this, and I think that was a good way of introducing the elements that were most important for each member of council. And I can see elements from every member of council in here. And so on that basis, I also want to thank all of my council colleagues for their work and their input into this plan, because I can certainly see, as I go through it, important elements that have been incorporated for each of the wards within the plan. And so I think that's a very helpful thing for council to see, but also for members of the council to see that their parts of town have been considered, and the important things in each ward are being taken care of. You certainly, for my part, I'm very excited, of course, to see the Trafalgar Reservoir land coming forward and being acquired. I'm also very excited to see the Valleybrook basketball court being moved to Iroquois Ridge, because it'll allow for an expansion of pickleball into Valleybrook Park, which I think will certainly help a number of different user groups in the area. So with that, Your Worship, I'd be pleased to move the motion when the time comes forward.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. We have a few more speakers, but we'll put your motion on the floor. No harm in that. The next is Councillor Chisholm, and then Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the report on page 53, there is a list of 2021 additional initiatives, capital initiatives. The one that is near to my heart is the new skate park that we're looking at. Now, there was some discussion, and I just need confirmation clarity. This location for the skate park, is it still at the Cornwall Park area, or is there a consideration for another area?
No, it's still for the Little League Park on Cornwall.
Okay. And somewhere in the readings, I saw the budget for it. Maybe I'm getting in the weeds with this, but I have some real concerns with respect to the budget for it, with respect to doing the appropriate skate park. So I'll take that offline and talk to the Commissioner of the Services on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps I could visit the park with you, and you can see how small the corner is where it would go. And we can do that in any of the good weather that's ahead of us the next few days. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I also want to thank staff for a good process in terms of the refresh, and that there is something covering the majority of concerns brought forth by residents. Could I just seek clarity on the Appendix B and the capital projects for consideration? So the one in particular that's on there that I hear from the downtown folks, as well as throughout all the residents associations, is the importance of the downtown cultural hub and downtown development plan. So is the intent to have a fulsome discussion at a capital planning meeting in regards to these 6 items that are in Appendix B? Just maybe a little clarity would help.
Madam CAO.
The intent is to have a discussion during the budget deliberations on the timing of those various projects that are listed in the report.
So thank you for that. So as a follow-up, during the budget meetings, would there be an opportunity for perhaps a refresh of the status, the timelines that initially had been there, and what next steps could be as part of the budget discussion?
Yes, Councillor.
I got that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I need well, we have a motion from Councillor Adams. If I can put that vote, is there any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. That carries. I need a motion to go past the hour to complete the agenda. Can I have one of those? Councillor Lischina, thank you very much. Any objection? Thank you, everybody. That carries. Now, the next item is the Asset Management Plan and Policy Update. The Director of Asset Management and the Commissioner of Community Infrastructure are available for your questions. Otherwise, I will look to see what is your pleasure, Council. Councillor Adams.
Be happy to move the items.
Thank you. Anyone with a question? Councillor O'Meara, you have your little hand up.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a quick question. Why trees aren't counted as an asset under our asset management system, or are they? I tried to look, I couldn't find it.
That's probably a question for Commissioner Sully. And she's deferring to Commissioner Fu. Now they're discussing that. And I think you're going to get Commissioner Sully.
Through you, Mayor Burton, they're not counted because they're considered a natural asset. That is something, though, going forward that we will have to look at, because there is quite a lot of discussion about adding natural assets into our asset registry. But at this time, they're not part of it.
Okay, yeah, I was curious because we spend a lot of money to keep a canopy, and when trees go down, we got to replace them. So if we know a life cycle, or we know we've got a big expenditure coming up, it might benefit us. Anyway, thank you very much for that answer. I appreciate it.
It's a timely question and a good one, and well worth noting, because we plant tens of thousands of trees a year, so we're building up quite an inventory. All right, the motion by Councillor Adams is on the floor. Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is published in the recommendation as published in the agenda is approved. Thank you, everybody. Item 9.9 is the Shorewood Promenade Shoreline Rehabilitation Study. Staff are available for questions if you have any. Otherwise, the motion is presented in the agenda with the report. Council, your pleasure. Councillor Duddick. Your hand is the same color as the book behind it. I didn't see it.
The item, please.
Thank you. It's moved by Councillor Duddick. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection and the motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Duddick. That brings us to the fishing restrictions report. And Chris Mark, the Director of Parks and Open Space, is available for your questions if you have any. Otherwise, the motion is to receive and to create a one-year pilot program to amend fishing restrictions as outlined in the report. And the staff would report back at the end of that time. Councillor Chisholm.
I move.
Thank you for your motion, Councillor Chisholm. You may be making fishers, I think we now say, very happy. Is there any objection to the report? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, that motion carries. That brings us now to the Oakville Enterprises Corporation Annual General Meeting and Financial Update, approval of the 2020 Consolidated Financial Statements, Directors' Remuneration, appointment of auditors, and appointment of directors and chair. Rob Lister, the CEO of Oakville Enterprises Corporation, is available, and otherwise there's a recommendation in your agenda that you've all reviewed carefully. What's your pleasure, Council? Councillor Duddick.
Motion to approve, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lischina, have you a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is regarding the auditor, KPMG. So they're part of the town. So Oakville Enterprises does not make a decision regarding the auditor. Is that correct?
No.
It's the town that does?
Oakville Enterprises makes its own choice.
Oh, okay. So my next question is, how long has KPMG been the auditor for Oakville Enterprises?
I was going to say, I think it might be 15 years, but I shouldn't guess. Let's see if Mr. Lister is available and has the answer. Otherwise, we'll just have to get back to you offline.
Okay.
I am available.
Oh, good. Mr. Lister, could you answer the question?
Yes, I believe it is about 15 years also. We have had a rotation of audit partners in that time, but it has been KPMG for that period of time.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Sorry, just one quick question. In terms of the director compensation, could Mr. Lister just was there benchmarking done in terms of the compensation that is being approved?
There is regular benchmarking that occurs across the different utilities and other organizations, and so the compensation that is being recommended is very consistent with utilities across the province, and it's on the low end.
And thank you for that. And is there, can you give us a percentage increase that occurred on that compensation at all?
Councillor, they've been frozen for as long as I can remember.
I'm just asking for clarification. So are they no longer frozen? I take it.
Well, if you grant an increase, it'll be the only increase they've had in since, well, in my time.
2013, I think, 14. It's in the report. I'm not actually looking at the report right now.
Yeah.
Just didn't see a percentage, and I thought we would have been provided it, but that's fine. Thanks very much for the information.
It's the percentage works. The percentage was calculated based on so that it would be identical to the percentage that council has received in the same period of time.
Okay, thanks very much for that clarity.
Sure, no problem. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll put the vote. Any objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, seeing none, that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Lister.
Thank you.
Councillor Dudek moved it. All right, the next item is the Oakville Municipal Development Corporation 2021 request for funding. Oh, wait, 10 point, oh. Council, I did not notice, 10.1, Oakville Enterprises Corporation approval of Board of Directors and Chair. Can I have a motion? Councillor Knoll, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, seeing no objection, that is carried also. Now we go to the Municipal Development Corporation request. Can I have a motion? Councillor Grant? Thank you. Is there an objection to the motion? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you, everybody. So that took care of 10.1 and 10.2, I believe, Madam Clerk, correct? And then we have no advisory committee minute meetings. And we have a new urgent item, which is a film request. Have you received the document that the clerk circulated earlier? All right, I'll read it. Ms. St. George, it didn't go to council? It did. Okay, you did get it. Well, I'll refresh your memory then. That section 17.2 of the procedure bylaw be waived to allow a new item of business to be added to the agenda. 2, that GEP Chucky Inc. film request for night filming activity is detailed in the May 21st report from the Economic Development and Corporate Strategy Department be approved, and that the Director of Transportation and Engineering be given delegated authority to approve operational aspects of commercial filming, including the use of special effects, hours of filming, and notification and consent. So this is really 2 votes. The first would be to waive the procedure bylaw. May I have a motion? Councillor Adams, thank you. Is there any objection to waiving the procedure bylaw? Madam Clerk, I see none. That carries. The next is I need a motion for the other 2 parts of this. Councillor Longo, thank you. Is there an objection to the motion by Councillor Longo? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, I declare that carried as well. Councillor Haslett-Deal?
Burton, I had my hand up for a question before the vote.
Oh, sorry.
And my question is, I'm going to assume that the house that is going to have the filming receives some level of compensation.
Yes.
But given the notice period is short, and given that it is in a residential neighborhood and going to go till 1 o'clock potentially in the morning, is there accommodation or remuneration to those that are impacted in the houses surrounding it?
I can tell you when I was a film producer, that was standard operating procedure, but let's see if Ms. St. George has any information about this instance.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I do know that the neighboring residents were compensated for earlier filming, and I'll just pass this over to Rachel Waller. She's been our film liaison with this particular production, and she can confirm whether there is further compensation to neighboring properties.
Through you, Mayor Burton, when there is, we just had them working on the street. So when there is a building that has, is going to be incorporated into the film request, then they are compensated. So it just depends on the level of filming in the area, but not the entire area is not compensated, just the houses that are impacted directly by the filming activity.
So thank you, Ms. Waller. So in terms of this property, you know, it's a lovely property and it's a lovely neighborhood, and we're pleased to have filming in Oakville, but it is running late into the hour, and it sits on a kitty corner. And so there's about 2 or 3 properties that when they go to do all that lighting up at night, which is what the report said, depending on if they have little children, et cetera, I mean, some people may be very excited and other people might be quite nervous. So in terms of notification, was it just a letter in their mailbox? Was like, how have we ensured that these neighbors, A, are not going to be surprised, B, are, as Mayor Burton said, it's a tradition in the film world to take care of the neighbors to make sure that all goes well. So I'm just asking if that in fact will occur.
So through you, Mayor Burton, we have had, they were shooting in the similar area a couple weeks ago. We notified the whole area and we had no objections. So we will go out to a very similar area and go from there. They, like I said last time, there were no objections and everyone was on board. We had them earlier in 2020. They did some drone filming. And when we went out and did that, some of the neighbors came out and, you know, were excited about it. So certainly we won't issue the permit until we have, you know, the feedback. We've given them until this Thursday next Thursday to give any feedback back. But last time we had no objections.
Okay, and just for clarity, so is the notification a mail drop, or is it a knock on the door, or is it a phone call?
So through you, Mayor Burton, due to COVID, we have updated our technique. So it is called a have your say letter. So it goes out to the community by mail, hand delivered. We don't knock on the doors due to COVID, but they have, you know, the production's email address, our film office email address, and they also is a Service Oakville responds to any of the feedback we get for the noise exemption, because we did have time to go out for a noise exemption this time, so they are given Service Oakville's contact directly for any concerns.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for asking the questions. I like any opportunity to remind the town that the film industry loves shooting in Oakville ever since that Christmas movie, and to make sure that they're welcome back. They've been, I think, models of good behavior, and that's pretty much true of the industry all over. Councillor Knoll, you know a lot about the film industry, and you now have your hand up. But you don't have your mic open.
Sorry, I apologize. I meant to take it down. My question just got answered. I just wanted to clarification on the notification issue. I noticed that there's delegated authority, so maybe just help answer the question. So the actual permit will not be issued if there is any significant issues from the surrounding neighborhood. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, that is correct.
So we're essentially approving this conditionally on that piece being done, as opposed to the last permit that was done that I shouldn't probably speak about because I have a conflict of interest on. But that's so there's nothing's going to happen until the public have their say.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, we have process. So sometimes notification is required and sometimes consent is required. Right. So because they're filming on the actual street, we need the consent.
Yeah, I can tell you, Your Worship, as somebody who's, I'm not involved in this application. I have nothing to do with this particular production. I am involved in several productions, including some more that are coming up in the very near future. I can tell you what you're saying about the industry is very true. They love Oakville. They want to do more work in Oakville, and they have been, from my experience, extraordinarily respectful ever since the Santa Claus movie back in the 1983, I think it was.
Well, I'll tell you how good, I'll tell you how much they like Oakville. I had a meeting today with a gentleman who is determined to build a film studio in Oakville. So there you go.
Yep.
All right, that remains carried, and it would now be in order to have a motion to rise and report to council. Councillor Elgar, thank you for that. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that's carried. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on consent items 7.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Confidential consent item 8.1. Discussion items 9.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And confidential discussion items 10.1 and 10.2, and item 15.2. A mover and seconder for the report would be in order. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Robertson, thank you. Quick reflexes. Any objection to the report? Seeing none, the report is adopted. Thank you. We have a new business item, and that is a notice of motion. And the notice of motion is printed in the agenda. You will be familiar with it, and that normally would be considered at the next council meeting to be held on June 21st. It's moved by Councillor Hazlett-Thiel and seconded by Councillor Giddings. I'll just ask, as a courtesy, would the councillors like us to waive the procedure bylaw and adopt this now, or would you like to wait?
I'd love to waive the procedure bylaw and get it passed tonight, but I know it's getting late in the hour, so I will go with what my council colleagues
Well, I'm happy, unless you object, to consider that a motion to waive the procedure bylaw, as long as Councillor Giddings is willing to be considered to have seconded it.
I'd be happy to second it.
And I'll
Mr.
ask
Mayor.
if there's any objection to that. And guess what? There is none. So that carries, Madam Clerk. And now we'll put the vote on the motion. And Councillor Hazlett-Thiel, would you and Councillor Giddings like to speak to this item or read it or anything like that? This is your opportunity. Councillor Giddings, your mic is off.
I guess Dave, go first.
Go ahead.
This is a lot like after you,
I'm not going to belabor
Alphonse.
this. You've all heard us talk about the need to redefine warehousing in our zoning definitions, and that there are changes that have occurred since our zoning bylaw was created that have created a great deal of angst for people. And so we think it's appropriate that when the official plan review is complete, that we make it a priority to assess those definitions and bring them more up to date with what's happening today and in the future. And I would appreciate your support on it.
Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This last July, for our colleagues that aren't on regional council, a similar motion was brought to regional council by Mayor Burton, outlining a number of items that perhaps should be looked at in our official plans, both locally and regionally, as we move forward due to the changing nature of business and technologies. And so this fits in with that, and I'm sure all of our council colleagues will certainly agree with its importance.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings, and thank you for remembering my initiative last July. May I put the vote? Is there any objection to the measure? Madam Clerk, there being no objection seen, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. There is a request for report before us. This is by Councillor O'Meara and Councillor Robertson. Councillor O'Meara, this is an important request, an important report. I certainly support it. I think you might like to speak to it. And Councillor Robertson.
Certainly, Your Worship. If you don't mind, I'll just read it very quickly here and then speak to it. Sorry, I gotta pull multiple windows up. So the request for report is to support the recovery of sport in Oakville and maximize the use of indoor and outdoor sports facilities. The council requests staff to conduct a review of the town's facility allocation policy in consultation with community sports organizations and report back to council on recommended policy updates, including municipal polity comparator information, summary of consultation results with community sports organizations, identification of any impact to sport organization access to town assets, and alignment with the town's recovery framework by the end of 2021. So in essence, we're just looking at, as we come out of this, the need for fields, the less need for indoor, and also to have a conversation about how we allocate our field space every year. Obviously we have core sports and those have been a long time priority for the town. And sometimes at the detriment to other young kids who decide to take different paths and choose academies or choose a wide range of other things, and they get left out from some of the access to our sports fields. So I think it's a good opportunity to review that and take a look and reach out to the sports organizations all throughout the town and our other municipalities to see if we're on the right path and see how we might be able to make sure there's room for everyone as our space is at a premium these days. So thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, members of council.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Robertson?
I also see it as a chance to build partnerships, even between sports groups. As we do our facilities, how can we multi-use those facilities, and how do we do that plan from our end to make sure that happens so you can have daytime users and nighttime users? I think that would accomplish a lot for sports by either gender, by age, by diversity. It could happen for a lot of our smaller sports that, right now think that one or two sports dominate everything we do. We realize those one or two sports involve so many players that it makes sense, but they see themselves shut out. So I think that if we can coordinate better partnerships, we'd be doing a great service for everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. May I put the vote? Oh, Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Worship. I guess I want to ask the mover and seconder. Usually we have an allocation policy review in anticipation of the Parks and Rec Master Plan. Is this outside of that process?
So this was worked on with Director Mark and Commissioner Bell, and this is that process. It's just sort of accelerating it a little bit in order to see how we're going to come out of this with COVID. So this is a part of that process. It's just being sped up a little bit.
Perfect, as long as we're not duplicating. Great, thank you.
Yeah, this is a request for a report. This is information seeking. Council's policies aren't changing as a result. Although, who knows, the information uncovered may motivate you to change or stick to your existing allocation policies. Any objection to the request? Seeing none, that is carried. Thank you. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Grant and I have a request for report, but it was not, for whatever reason, it did not leave my outbox on my email. I'm wondering, can I introduce it? It's a very short request for report. It's one sentence.
Please share the sentence with us.
Thank you. So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Grant that staff report on the future of Reservoir Park in Ward 5 and the potential for acquisition thereof from the region of Halton for future use as a playground and or splash pad. And if I could just very, very briefly speak to it, when we were going through the siting process for a new splash pad facility in Ward 5, we discovered in no uncertain terms that there's a lack of playground facilities, active playground facilities in this portion of our ward, in the southernmost portion of our ward. And we were not able to accommodate any facility like this anywhere else. This is currently a passive park that we, I think, rent for $1 or something from the region for basically open green space. I believe, and I've talked to the regional staff a few times, that it is surplus to their needs. I would like to determine if this is something that we could potentially, maybe not tomorrow, I mean, subject to budget availability, et cetera, but if we could at least go down the path of looking at potentially adding this to our parks facilities for potential expansion of an active play facility in that area. College Park in particular, which had spent a good part of its last 20 years being a fairly mature community, is regenerating at a rapid pace, and it's no longer the community of retirees. It's a community of very young children, and we see that for the future as well, in light of some of the development that's occurring all around this particular park space.
Councillor Knoll and Councillor Grant, I certainly support your request. I can tell you that the region has not declared it surplus yet, but you know, let us see if we can persuade them. So,
thank you.
Is there any objection to the request for report? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you, both of you. A mover and seconder for the bylaws 75, 83, 91, and 94 is printed in the agenda, but not the other ones. Is in order. Councillor Longo, and a seconder. Councillor Lischina, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. The bylaws are adopted. That completes our work, and it isn't even 10:30 quite yet, so well done, Council. I want to thank you for the very good contributions that you made, the many fine questions. Councillor Duddick?
Sorry, Your Worship, I may have missed it. Congratulatory items and words of condolence. We recently lost a very dear friend, especially to the Heritage Committee here in town, but as a community leader and just a beautiful person. Terry Smith passed away on Saturday morning, and our thoughts and prayers are with Francine and the rest of the family. He took a very strong battle for cancer, and being typical Terry, he was upbeat and positive to the very end. So our thoughts are with the family.
Thank you for those condolences. He was a very good friend to all of us, and had quite a life of great achievement, and leaves a large and loving family. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. He will be missed. Council, I congratulate you on your outstanding work tonight. This has been a pleasure working with you again, and I look forward to our next meeting. This meeting is over.